Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Marvel. Hero System. Obtain teleportation ability at the beginning. Chapter 81. As Tony's assistant, after hearing that Tony asked her to sneak into the office and steal information, Pepper's mind went blank. She is aware of Tony's recent destruction of Stark's weapons, because the injuries that appear on Tony's body from time to time cannot be hidden from her, so she has always opposed Tony's creation of a steel suit to do those dangerous things. Rejection was her first reaction, but within a second of her persistence, she was met by Tony's words, "When I was making murderous weapons, you were by my side. Now I want to destroy them. You are by my side." To the smash. Thinking of Tony's passionate brown eyes when he said this, little Pepper felt as if he was about to be suffocated by that deep emotion. In this way, she agreed, and then followed Tony's instructions and came to Tony's office in Stark. Pepper looked around vigilantly. Seeing that no one was paying attention, Pepper gently pushed open the door of Tony's office in Stark, walked carefully, and walked to Tony's computer in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. She was a little flustered. This was the first time she had done such a thief-like thing. Looking at the familiar environment in the office, she couldn't help but feel a little funny. You must know that when Tony was around, she didn't walk in openly of. Putting aside these messy thoughts in his mind, he inserted the USB flash drive Tony gave him before he came here into the USB port of the computer, and then through the intelligent program stored in the USB flash drive, he unlocked the system password that had been modified by Obadiah into the operating system. According to Tony's instructions, Pepper found the folder in the computer where important information was hidden, and then pieces of weapon design information appeared and transaction information popped up. At this moment, a weapon document caught her attention. Looking at the weapon design drawing shown in the document that was very similar to the steel armor of Tony Lab, Pepper looked at the information in the document with doubts, and said to herself, "Is this Tony's armor? Is he imitating Tony's armor? What the hell is Obadiah doing?" Just as she was thinking, a video popped up with the retrieval of information, and then a picture that made her feel like she had stopped breathing appeared in front of her eyes. A group of dangerous people with guns, a Tony with blood on his face, and the words from the terrorist's mouth all proved that Obadiah was the main participant in Tony's hijacking by terrorists, and he was still holding him. A sinful deal for the purpose of killing Tony. Shocked, incomparably shocked, Pepper didn't expect that there was such a vicious heart hidden under Obadiah's benevolent appearance. Obadiah is too much of a danger to Tony. Such important information can not only help Tony get Stark back, but also allow Obadiah to get the trial he deserves, so Pepper clicked copy without hesitation. Boom. Just after clicking copy, there was a sound of closing the door like a thunder, and the scared little Pepper couldn't help but shuddered. Obadiah. Looking at Obadiah standing in front of the door, Pepper felt a little flustered, and after Tony's long-term, destroyed, ability to adapt, she suppressed the panic and turned to Obadiah. Obadiah flashed a professional smile. Pepper. Looking at Pepper sitting in front of the computer, Obadiah narrowed his eyes slightly, with a hint of doubt flashing in his eyes. "What's the matter, Pepper?" Obadiah walked to the wine cabinet in the office and poured himself a glass of whiskey with an unconscious gloomy look in his eyes. Listening to Obadiah's question, Pepper's mind turned rapidly, and then he showed a bitter smile and said, "About Tony. I know your difficulties." Hearing Pepper's words, the gloomy look in Obadiah's eyes was replaced by a trace of surprise. He felt that Pepper was showing his favor to him. Hearing this, Obadiah lowered his head and added ice cubes to the whiskey in his glass, thinking about how credible the words were by the way, and little Pepper took advantage of this little time to put the newspaper on the table, slightly pulled it to cover the very conspicuous USB flash drive. Tony is not the Tony he used to be. Now he has caused us too much trouble. After adding the ice cubes, Obadiah walked towards little Pepper with a fake sadness on his face. Shaugily wittily clicked the lock screen of the computer. Glancing at the computer, Obadiah, who found nothing suspicious, sat on the edge of the computer desk, looked at Tony's assistant, felt the need to win over, and then threw an olive branch. "You are a rare woman, Tony is not at all. I don't know how to cherish you. I really need people like you here." Looking at the smile on Obadiah's face, Pepper was disgusted by the fake smile, suppressed the anger in his heart, and showed a fake smile when facing the reporter. Thank you very much for your compliment." After the voice fell, she guessed that the data had been copied, smiled slightly, and said, "I still have something to do, so I will leave first." Standing up while speaking, she cleverly held the newspaper and the USB flash drive in her hand. Hearing that Pepper obviously rejected his solicitation, Obadiah was taken aback for a moment. After seeing Pepper's movement of holding the newspaper, his doubts rose sharply, and then he said to Pepper, who had already walked to the door, "Is this today's newspaper?" "Knock," Pepper yelled inwardly, looking at Obadiah, who was already walking towards him, and replied softly, "Yes." "Show me." Handing over the newspaper, carefully hiding the USB flash drive in his hand, Xiaojiao smiled, "Then I'll go first." "Okay," responded, seeing the obviously flustered steps of little Pepper walking towards the stairs. Obadiah had a bad feeling in his heart, rushed to the computer, turned on the computer, and watched the display showing that the copy was completed. After saying a few words, he rushed out with a furious breath. Pepper seemed to feel the anger from behind, and his face was flustered, but his eyes lit up when he saw the special agent Phil, who made an appointment to come to understand the situation at the press conference. "Miss Potts, about what you promised me." Seeing Pepper's flustered expression, Phil was a little puzzled. "Follow me." Feeling the cold gaze behind her, little Pepper hurriedly said. "Okay." Phil was a little surprised by Chili Pepper's quickness. He responded and followed. Looking at the man walking with Pepper, Obadiah, who recognized the identity of this man as an agent, gave up the idea of recovering the information. "At first, I wanted to try to study the miniature arc reactor by myself, but those idiots probably couldn't do it. So, Tony, I need to visit your last side in advance." Whispering, thinking of the arc reactor on Tony's chest, Obadiah felt hot, smiled coldly, and hurried to Tony's house. Pepper, who knew Obadiah's conspiracy, was a little flustered, and the decisions she made when she was flustered were unavoidably inaccurate, and she also underestimated the viciousness of Obadiah. So after she came out with Agent Phil, she chose to explain Obadiah's conspiracy to Agent Phil first, and then called Tony in a panic after being reminded by Phil. "Tony." After the call was connected, little Pepper yelled a few times, but there was no answer from Tony, and a blind tone came from the phone anxiously. "Tony, do you know? I tried to kill you twice." Retracting the palm-sized nerve-paralyzing device, the smile on Obadiah's face was like a demon that had succeeded in plotting, full of lethality to Tony. Because of nerve paralysis, blue veins burst out, his face was extremely pale, and he lost all mobility. Tony, who couldn't even blink, heard this. His brown eyes were full of doubt and anger. While preparing to dismantle the arc reactor on Tony's chest, he observed Tony. After seeing this look, Obadiah smiled triumphantly. "Doubt? Don't be doubtful. As your Uncle Stan, I will give you puzzle." Putting the disassembly instrument on Tony's chest, Obadiah said with a smile, 10 years ago, you were rescued by a nosy black emperor. Because you were able to lay golden eggs, I let you go. It seems that you made the right choice at that time. You were destined to lay the last most valuable golden egg for me 10 years later." With a clear sound, Obadiah pulled out the reactor on Tony's chest, looked at the glowing arc reactor, and showed a fascinated look. "It's beautiful, isn't it? You always create amazing inventions, and this time is no exception. Don't worry, I will use this reactor as the core of the latest weapon. After you die, it will be remembered in history. Leave a strong mark on it." Seeing the look in Tony's eyes, Obadiah put away the arc reactor and whispered, angry, "Unwilling." After a pause, with a crazy smile, he said, "Why are you unwilling? Even your parents died at the hands of me and that organization. What are you?" Hearing this, even Tony, who was in a paralyzed state, was shocked, and then flames of extreme anger and hatred burst out of his eyes. "Angry? You shouldn't have Pepper involved, but that's fine. You gave me a reason to kill her, so I want to know if you still have the strength to be angry when you know the news of her death." Quote. After saying this, Obadiah stood up, as if he suddenly thought of something. He patted his bald head suddenly, making a regretful expression. "Ah, I forgot, it seems that there is no arc reactor. You will die, but it's also good, so you will have less time to despair. Look at Uncle Stan, he still loves you. Don't you? Ha ha." As soon as the words fell, Obadiah hurried away with triumphant steps. He did not forget that he just made a promise to kill Pepper. The conversation was divided into two parts. Just when Obadiah successfully got the arc reactor, Pepper called Rhodes, who she thought could help him now, and briefly said something about Obadiah. Xiaojiao felt a little relieved, and then looked at Phil, who was standing beside him with a somewhat conflicted expression. Did you forget something important? Oh, not at all. Phil put away his conflicted expression, smiled friendlily, and then said, let's go to the district you mentioned. Well, Phil lied to Pepper. He was just conflicting about whether to tell Leo about it. If Leo knew, then all these troubles in front of him would be solved, but if he did so, he would lose their aegis. What happened to the game? This will also lose a chance to be kind to Tony and Stark, so he is conflicted. 10 minutes later, in the 16th district of Stark Industries, Phil put aside his ambivalence for a while, and carefully checked everything inside, but the next moment, the scream of little Pepper caught his attention, and looked at the after the monster-like steel giant slapped away the agents he had brought. Phil finally made up his mind and called Leo. What did you say? Obadiah. Tony. Hearing Agent Phil's anxiety and the sound of gunfire on the phone, Leo froze for a moment, and turned to I, who was sitting next to him with a puzzled face. After Ma said a word, she disappeared into her home with Xingye. Tony. Leo was shocked as he watched Tony struggling to crawl forward on the ground. He lifted Tony up, looked at Tony's pale face, and said, I know about Obadiah. Then seeing Tony's anxious eyes, he asked, what do you want to say? Just think about it. As he spoke, he used his telepathy. Quick, take me to the lab, there's still a reactor core. It's on the bench. Hearing Tony's words, Leo didn't hesitate, and directly took Tony to his laboratory. After seeing the core placed on the test bench, he directly pulled it over with his mind, crushed the outer glass cover, and then put the reactor core it was installed on his chest, and a series of actions were quickly completed in less than 3 seconds. His life was safe. Tony also breathed a sigh of relief, remembering what Obadiah said when he left. He continued to say to Leo with a little anxiety in his mind, Pepper is in danger, she is with Stark now, help me protect her. After a slight pause, Tony continued with overwhelming hatred and anger, when I recover in a few minutes, I will kill that fool with my own hands. He killed my parents. Okay, he replied, and put Tony on the chair. After the Starry Night turned into a black suit, Leo disappeared. Boom. Dodging in embarrassment from the steel palm that could slap a concrete pillar to pieces, Phil wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, and looked at the agent he brought, who was covered by the steel giant like a puppet. After losing his life, Phil suddenly thought of his idol Captain America. If he was there, he should be able to hit this steel monster. While saying this in his heart, he rolled a few times in embarrassment. He dodged the bullet that shot at him, but the next moment, he was pinched by the monster that suddenly accelerated. Agent, you shouldn't be involved. Holding Phil's head with his huge palm, Obadiah's voice was full of pity. Sir, can you change your posture so that my neck will be stretched? Phil raised his hand and slapped the steel palm, with a gentle smile still on the corner of his mouth. Don't worry, Agent, you won't have any worries soon. After speaking, the palms began to increase strength slowly. I heard that Captain America has news, but I don't know if I will have a chance to meet my idol. Feeling his head about to be crushed, Phil thought regretfully. Teleported to the vicinity of Stark Industries, listening to the gunshots not far away, Leo frowned, locked on the source of the sound, and rushed to the place where the gunshots were fired at an extremely fast speed. Looking at Phil, whose head was pinched, Leo flashed his body and appeared directly in front of the steel giant. After saving Phil with his thoughts, he kicked out, and the powerful force strengthened by Xingye erupted, as if he was kicked away. Like a rubber ball, kicked the steel giant away. Phil, who was rescued by Leo, stabilized his body, shook his aching head, looked at Leo standing beside him, and smiled wryly. Hi, thank you, Mr. Leo. I thought my head would burst like a watermelon the next moment. It's a pity, you don't have the chance to see this scene. Seeing the steel giant rushing towards him with a furious aura, Leo moved his palm slightly, and the power of thought gushed out, directly trapping the steel giant, as if pressing like a mad dog. It was pressed to the ground. Seeing the steel giant facing down with its limbs stretched out in a shameful posture on the ground, Phil glanced at the calm Leo and said solemnly, I don't want to see that scene in my life. Looking at the steel giant, who was still struggling, Leo's eyes flashed coldly, and he said coldly, Obadiah, save yourself some effort. I really want to pick you out of this ugly garbage. Look what you will look like after losing the protection of this ridiculous battle suit. but killing a disheartened old man, Tony should not be relieved, so you were really lucky. He has a deep memory of the last time Leo slapped him in the face at the IO group, so Leo's hateful voice was deeply engraved in his mind, so when Leo opened his mouth, Obadiah cried out in shock. Leo, you are the Black Emperor. At this time, the little pepper hiding in the distance covered his mouth in surprise after hearing Obadiah's roar, and then ran to Leo with incredible eyes, and asked tentatively, "Are you Leo?" He nodded, and after confirming his identity to Pepper, he asked, "Are you all right?" Pepper. It's okay. Agent Phil and the others have protected me very well. Pepper looked at Leo, who was both familiar and unfamiliar, with a curious expression on his face, and then said, "You are so cool." At this moment, a golden and red figure descended from the sky, and from it came a shout full of hatred, "Obadiah, Stan." Ha, who did I say? It turned out to be the naive little Tony. Obadiah's tone was full of sarcasm, then changed the subject, and said with hatred, just a little bit, I can send you and your parents away. Go to the reunion. After I personally tore up your protective battle clothes bit by bit, you will have the opportunity to go down and accept their anger. Tony, who was extremely angry, calmed down, but the words he said were full of strong feelings. Extreme hatred makes people shudder. Let him go, Leo. He said to Leo, who was standing aside, and the iron suit rushed towards Obadiah with Tony's burning anger. Obadiah, who had been let go by Leo, hadn't stood up yet. The next moment, Tony stepped on him from the sky, and then the palms of Tony's palms lit up, and the palm cannon released a powerful impact. Knock it out directly. Obadiah, who rolled on the ground to a very far distance, controlled his own iron tyrant, and thrust his palm into the ground, leaving a deep mark, and finally stopped, and then a round appeared on the other arm. The rotating machine gun poured a large number of bullets at Tony. Carefully looking at Leo in the distance, Obadiah was full of dread in his heart. He didn't have much fear of Tony, but Obadiah had to take care of this long-renowned hero, superior. Even if he defeats Tony, he will still face the attack of the Black Emperor. He has already experienced the power of the Black Emperor, and he has no confidence at all, so now he is facing an unsolvable situation, waiting for him. Perish all the way. Let me be Tony's tool to vent his anger. Haiwang, you are so arrogant, I will let you lose your friends because of your arrogance. Obadiah roared in his heart, facing this preordained result, he has completely lost his mind. With footsteps that shattered the ground, the Iron Overlord, under the control of Obadiah, rammed towards Tony like a wild beast with a rain of bullets. Accidentally, Tony was directly crushed by the huge body of the Iron Overlord. Facing the iron fist that was swinging towards him, which was half the size of his body, a large amount of energy gathered in his chest, and the next moment an orange beam of light shot out from it, flipping Iron Overlord huge body out, crashing into the wall of Stark Industries, and falling on the street with endless traffic outside the wall. Swoosh. Getting up, Tony chased after him without hesitation. Insufficient energy. Observing that the reactor lights on Tony's chest dimmed slightly, Leo frowned unobtrusively. I'm going to watch Tony, he said in a low voice, and Leo, who was afraid of Tony's accident, chased him out at a very fast speed with lightning. Facing the sudden battle between the two Iron Men, the entire street was in turmoil, and Obadiah, who was in a frenzy, directly lifted a car full of people. Looking at a car lifted up by the Iron Bully and hearing the screams coming from inside, Leo's eyes flashed coldly, and he said to Obadiah, "If you don't want me to participate, better put that car down." Hearing Leo's words, the action of the Iron Overlord who was about to throw the car stopped instantly. Seeing Leo, who was full of strong pressure, he put down the car like an obedient mechanical doll, and then rushed towards Tony again. Palm cannons, incendiary bombs, and the weapons carried by Tony's suit are really limited. Facing the Iron Tyrant who is full of weapons on his body, he can only be beaten. After the Iron Tyrant shoots a small missile again and blows Tony away, Tony controls Mark to fly on the ground. He jumped into the air, intending to take a short breath, but he didn't expect a lot of flames to be sprayed out from the Iron Overlord feet. Looking at Obadiah who rose into the sky and flew towards him, Tony had a flash of inspiration, remembering the icing situation when he flew to a high altitude last time, and then increased his speed to the limit, and flew upwards without hesitation. Seeing like this, Obadiah let out a crazily sadistic laugh, and chased after him with claws and teeth. Well, do you want that guy to freeze? Seeing through Tony's thoughts in an instant, Leo floated in the air, smiled slightly, and chased after him. Sure enough, as the height increased, the Iron King appeared in the same situation as Tony's last test. A thick layer of ice armor formed all over his body, and then the power system failed. When he was about to catch Tony, he took Uba unwilling, Dia fell down. Noticing that the reactor on Tony's chest was flickering like a broken light bulb due to lack of energy, Leo supported Tony with his mind and asked with a smile, "Do you need help?" "Ha!" Tony let out a long breath. "It's time, my friend." The Iron King, who fell into the air, once again spewed out a large amount of flames, stopping his falling figure. Seeing this scene, Leo reminded Tony, "That guy is not dead. My energy is about to run out. I must kill him myself." Listening to Tony's unwilling words and looking at the reactor on Tony's chest, Leo paused for a moment, but suddenly asked, "Can you charge this thing? Can it be charged?" Hearing Leo's words, Tony was stunned for a moment, and then saw a smirk on the corner of Leo's mouth, and he pressed his hand on his chest, and then a series of silver lights shot from Leo's body, burst out. "The energy is 120%. Hearing Jarvis' prompt, Tony hurriedly shouted, "Stop, I don't want to explode." Dispersing the lightning in his hand, removing the power of thought, looking at Tony who had regained his power, Leo pointed at the iron bully under his feet, and said with a smile, "What are you waiting for? Oh, I will definitely dismantle it into scrap iron." As soon as the words fell, Tony rushed straight down. Facing the charging Tony, the Iron Overlord didn't seem to show any weakness, and the missiles on his shoulders and arms were fired in unison. Drawing an elegant arc in the air, Tony sprinkled careful incendiary bombs on his body. After detonating the missiles following behind him, the energy emitted from his feet increased again, and then with a sudden increase in speed, he directly hit to the chest of the iron bully, facing the head in front of him. The palm cannon on the palm of Tony's suit gathered a lot of energy. Boom! The energy exploded, and the Iron Overlord took Obadiah, who was stunned by the impact, and was directly blown away by this powerful energy, like a kite being blown away by a strong wind, swinging and being hit far away place. But this is not over yet. The next moment, before Obadiah could control the swinging Iron Overlord, Tony rushed directly behind Obadiah with his own speed, and directly reached out to buckle the gap in his steel helmet. Then he pulled hard to tear off Obadiah's mask, and when the Iron Tyrant's hand was about to catch him, he stepped on the Iron Tyrant's back with both legs, and by the reaction force, he stepped the Iron Tyrant into the air again while rushing to the distance. He dodged the Iron Overlord attack, and then used his flexibility far superior to the Iron Overlord to dismantle a lot of Iron Overlord armor in the air. "Tony, I'm going to kill you. Stark is mine." Obadiah, whose iron arm had been completely removed by Tony, showed a furious face, and then all the missiles carried by the Iron King were shot out directly. It's useless, after all, his Iron Overlord only appeared in imitation of Tony's Mark I, and it's not enough to face the full energy Mark III. Locking on the missiles, Mark I shot precise bullets from his shoulder. After detonating those missiles halfway, Tony rushed directly in front of Oba. The arc reactor, and then the Iron Overlord, who lost its power source, fell straight down from the air like a large piece of steel garbage with Obadiah's horrified screams. Looking quietly at Obadiah, who fell down, Tony said lightly, "Stark Industries was never yours, so it's called Stark." Boom! There was a loud noise. Pepper and Phil looked at the Iron King, who fell from the air into Stark's yard, and turned their heads unconsciously. Phil twitched the corners of his mouth, looked at Obadiah, who was no longer recognizable as a human, and said helplessly, "Miss Pepper, I need you and Tony to help explain my case." "It should be." "Oh." In response, Xiaojiao covered her mouth and bent down. After all, she couldn't hold back the nausea and spit out a mouthful of sour water. New York will never be short of news, so there will be no shortage of journalists and whistleblowers who are not afraid of death. So the fight between Tony and Obadiah was filmed, and even Leo and Tony wearing a mark came out from the sky together. Yang's figure was also photographed. The next day, because of the battle in Stark, who is now on the cusp of the storm, became a hot topic of conversation again, and even, because of breaking those illegal transactions, Tony also got his own name. No, Iron Man. The appearance of Iron Man in Stark, there is undoubtedly a very close connection between the two, and the battle that took place in Stark also needs to be explained to people, so it is inevitable to hold a press conference. You just have to read it. We found 50 people for you to prove that you were not in Stark last night. Phil handed the speech in his hand to Tony. I would like to express my heartfelt thanks for what you have done, Phil. Seeing Phil, who had been busy all night, Pepper promptly sent his thanks. You're welcome, this is my job. Phil smiled gently, and swiped his favorability in front of Pepper again. Remember, Mr. Stark, as long as you keep reading, what happened last night can calm down. Phil reminded Tony carefully again, and he was really not very relieved about Tony. In this regard, Tony just shook the corner of his mouth and said nothing. Manor. Emma handed Leo the coffee in her hand, and sat gently beside Leo, watching the live broadcast of the press conference with a smile on her face. It's pitiful for Rhodes. Every time something like this happens, he is pushed out by the military to solve these troubles for Tony. For Rhodes, who was making an opening speech at the reception, Emma felt a little sympathetic to this poor guy up. This time, S.H.I.E.L.D. is also involved. For Tony, S.H.I.E.L.D. has spent a lot of thought. It seems that S.H.I.E.L.D. is really determined to win Tony. Leo took a sip of the coffee in his hand and smiled. For what happened last night, S.H.I.E.L.D. has arranged a lot of evidence for Tony, and even made enough arrangements for Obadiah's death. Then this proves that they still don't have a thorough understanding of Tony's character. Hearing Leo's words, Emma smiled slightly and nodded. After being carefully dressed by Pepper, Tony walked into the venue of the press conference in a well-dressed manner. Looking at the speech script Phil gave him before he came, he smiled indifferently, kneaded it into a ball, and stuffed it into the cloth standing beside him. Rhodes' hands. Rhodes froze for a moment, then quietly glanced at the scraps of paper in his hand, and found that it was a speech explaining the situation last night. Then he showed a silent wry smile. He knew that this time Tony was going to be willful again. Cough. Regarding what happened last night, logically, I should read it according to the speech they gave me. After all, the closing of Stark's weapons department last time caused everyone a lot of trouble, but... Hearing Tony's words, those reporters were shocked, knowing that this guy who always played cards out of common sense was about to surprise them again. Sure enough, Tony's next sentence instantly detonated the entire venue. But the truth is, I am Iron Man. Boom. Hearing Tony's words, those reporters went crazy instantly. What news is more exciting than a rich man becoming a superhero? Mr. Stark, may I ask why you chose to be Iron Man? Mr. Stark, can you tell me more about what happened last night? Mr. Stark. Looking at the chaotic press conference, Rhodes, who was standing with Tony, sighed helplessly, and when he was about to speak out to make a rescue, a question came out from the crowd that made everyone look forward to an answer even more. Excuse me, Mr. Stark, do you know the Black Emperor? Are you friends with him? Hearing this question, Rhodes was taken aback for a moment, and then looked at Tony. About this question, my answer is, yes. I know him. I am friends with him. To be blunt, since I even admit that I am Iron Man, I admit that I know the Black Emperor and are friends with him. What kind of problems will there be? Although everyone was looking forward to hearing such an answer from Tony, they were stunned when they actually heard the affirmative answer. Do you know his real identity? Can you tell us about it? The question from the silent venue was unusually eye-catching. I can't tell you about this question without his consent. Tony smiled slyly, avoiding the question, and then seriously said to the camera, my friend, do you want to express yourself with me? True identity. Hearing this question, whether it was the reporters present or everyone in front of the TV, they held their breath for a moment. They knew that this was an invitation from Tony to his friend. For the Black Emperor, the superhero who silently protects the city, everyone has a bit of respect, and at the same time is curious about his true identity. Peter, do you think the Black Emperor will reveal his true identity? Gwen squeezed Peter's hand with a nervous and expectant look on his face. I also want to see his true face. Peter was also a little excited. He admired the Black Emperor, not only because he saved his uncle, but also because he could persist for so many years in this city. And feel moved. There are many people in the same mood as Peter and Gwen. At this moment, everyone is crying in their hearts and full of expectations. Black Emperor, Black Emperor, Black Emperor. In the silent reception hall, whoever shouted the word, Black Emperor, first, then a higher-pitched shout rang out, and then through the live broadcast, it spread to the in the ears of everyone who was watching. They couldn't help shouting along with the shouts on the TV. In an instant, the city seemed to be boiling because of this name. Manor. Tony is really. Watching the shouts coming from the TV, Leo smiled and shook his head. While feeling helpless for Tony's behavior, his heart also felt a little boiling. Whatever you choose, I will support you. Emma looked at Leo's blue eyes, with a relaxed smile and a faint look of expectation, as if she heard the boiling in Leo's heart, and at the same time guessed Leo's choice. Emma, thank you. Leo is not an impulsive person, but he is a superhero who will not disappoint. Facing everyone's expectations, Leo disappeared with Starry Night. Black Emperor. Black Emperor. The whole city was still shouting, and at this moment, a black figure silently appeared beside Tony. Seeing this familiar black figure, the entire venue and everyone in front of the TV fell silent instantly. At this moment, everyone seemed to have stopped breathing, and then their eyes widened. Smiling slightly, Leo's black mask covering half of his face disappeared under Xingyi's control. The next moment, a face familiar to everyone appeared in front of them. This is Leo of the EO Group, the creator of the life-healing instrument. A billionaire. The moment they saw the true face of the Black Emperor, everyone was excited. After all, compared with arms, the life-healing instrument is closer to the life of every ordinary person, so in an instant, Leo was recognized. Rhodes looked at Leo and Tony. His mind seemed to have crashed now, and he couldn't understand why these rich people like to be superheroes. Ah, so he is the Black Emperor. I love him so much. So handsome. Gwen cheered like a little girl who got a gift on Christmas Eve when she saw the true face of the Black Emperor, completely ignoring her hearing her words. Peter was a little embarrassed. I am the Black Emperor. When Leo said these words, all the people involuntarily obeyed their own wishes and applauded from the bottom of their hearts. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for saving my son. Thank you. Hearing Leo's words, countless people silently expressed their gratitude in their hearts. After 10 years of persistence, Leo has not only completed a task of rising to fame, he has been affirmed by everyone in the city, which is different from the Spider-Man who just appeared, and also different from the recently awakened superhero Iron Man. He is a superhero who has silently guarded the city from the very beginning. Time has always been the best witness. Obviously, the Black Emperor has withstood the test of time. If there are still quite a few people who treat Spider-Man and Iron Man with a dismissive attitude, they only have admiration for the Black Emperor. Dude, I shouldn't have let you come. You stole my limelight. Today is Stark's reception. Hearing the deafening applause, Tony curled his lips with a smile on his face. He never thought he, Tony Stark, would one day feel excited as a friend. Well, let him use this at this time to make him feel a little sick, after saying it words. Next, let's end it, whispered to Tony, and Leo disappeared silently again. The true identity of the Black Emperor is Leo of the EO Group, and Tony and Stark are Iron Man. Such shocking news once again swept the country like a storm. When groups of supporters of the Black Emperor and Iron Man appeared, C. Tucker Industries and IO Group have also become the biggest beneficiaries. Boom. In a laboratory full of various organ specimens, Stryker, who received the news that Leo was the Black Emperor, threw the container containing the specimens to the ground with a distorted expression. How can a mutant be a human hero? How ridiculous. As an extreme racist, he couldn't accept such a thing. After his anger, Stryker changed his mind and smiled coldly. Although I don't know if those ignorant people know his identity as a mutant, but if he, as a hero, stands in the position of a mutant and does something that hurts human beings, then what will the race of mutants face? What kind of situation? It seems that it was a good move to keep Kara in the first place, and those clone soldiers who failed also need to be dealt with. Don't let me down, Black Emperor. With a whisper, a cold smile appeared on Stryker's cold face. Since Leo announced his identity as the Black Emperor, although there have been many changes in his life compared to before, it has not had much impact on him. Among the people who knew his identity as the Black Emperor, the most excited ones were those mutant children of Academy X. For Leo, they admired his strength. Now Leo has another hero status, so, they now directly regard Leo as their idol, especially Little Rascal and Burning John. Of course, because of Leo's own strength, Leo's identity has also been questioned as a mutant, but for Leo, people seem to be extraordinarily trusting and tolerant, even saying that it doesn't matter even if he is a mutant, he is still a mutant. It's their superhero Black Emperor. After Professor X saw this situation, he became more determined about the goal of peaceful coexistence between humans and mutants. Since Leo can gain people's trust in 10 years, why can't the mutant race gain people's trust in more time? What about approval? Regarding Leo's situation, after Magneto knew about it, although he felt that this was not the same path as he had always insisted on, just like Professor X and him chose different paths, they were still best friends. Leo's appreciation became even stronger because of this. It has been more than 2 months since Leo and Tony revealed their identities. Because of his hero status, whenever Leo appears now, he will be surrounded by some enthusiastic people. For this situation, Tony is also in the same situation, but he feels a little bit of fun. But recently, Leo has disappeared in front of everyone, because he has been busy upgrading equipment for the Magic Group recently. Discard all the previous equipment of the Magic Group. After more than a month of research and improvement by Leo, including Witten, the equipment of the people in the Magic Group is completely new. Based on the concussion grenade, Leo has developed a gun that emits a concussion shock beam. In addition, Leo also equipped them with battle suits that could withstand at least tons of impact. In addition to resisting deadly attacks for them, this battle suit could also enhance their speed and strength. In addition to protective combat clothing and long-range weapons, Leo also made melee weapons for them, such as the Nepalese scimitar with strong and sharp magic runes. After testing, these weapons penetrated those. There is no pressure at all on the steel plate with a thickness of 5 centimeters. Of course, the most important thing is that Leo equipped them with one of Heimerdinger's favorite inventions, the automatic magic turret. Attack, and because of the automatic energy absorption rune, after accumulating enough energy in the battle, it can also emit a laser with strong lethality. Firearms, battle suits and turrets, 3 pieces of equipment, Leo marked them with space runes, which can be carried by the Magic Group. As for the Nepalese scimitar, because it is only more than 40 centimeters long, the Magic Group usually it can be carried on the body. Besides, a person can only have 3 space rune marks. Leo improved the equipment for the Magic Group, not because he was full or out of boredom. The fundamental reason was that a week ago, Manor was attacked, and Leo and Emma were not there at the time. Therefore, the Magic Group responsible for the safety of Manor fought with it. Although the attackers were all wiped out by the Magic Group, because the person who came had the ability to mutate, and there were 4 or 5 of them, several of the members of the Magic Group were still seriously injured. Although Leo arrived in time, he rescued the injured team members and treated their injuries, but this incident also sounded the alarm for Leo, that is, after his identity was announced, someone was following him. So in order to prevent this kind of situation from happening, he spent a lot of effort to comprehensively improve the equipment and weapons for the members of the Magic team. Luxurious and advanced equipment, strong personal combat ability and a strong sense of teamwork, the current overall strength of the Magic Group is very powerful. On the 3rd day after changing the Magic Group, not far from Manor, a woman with an extremely indifferent expression was quietly observing, with cold eyes like a robot. When she saw Manor, Leo and Emma, who were walking, became more colorful. After a few seconds, the coldness on their faces faded away, and they were full of charm. Order. Lurk next to Leo and Emma, always on call. From the first time she opened her eyes and saw the world, she received such an unbreakable order. Other than that, her mind was blank. Oh, yes, she was also given a name because of the mission, Kara. And just now, because she saw the relationship between the mission target Leo and Emma, she was like a program that was activated, and suddenly there were a lot of things in her mind, among which camouflage was the most basic and most proficient skill. With enchanting steps, with a confused and excited expression on her face, she rushed directly to the gate of Manor, looked at Leo and Emma who just happened, passing by, and shouted with an excited expression on her face, "Emma." Hearing this familiar voice, Emma shook her body and turned around stiffly. When she saw the person standing at the door, her eyesight instantly became blurred, and then she yelled out inexplicably, "Sister." 10 minutes later, in the living room of Leo's house. What happened? How did you get here? I don't know, I don't remember anything, I only remember Emma. For Emma and Leo's question, Kara seemed to have only this answer. Regarding the sudden appearance of Carla, there were many doubts, but considering Emma's emotional relationship, Leo didn't ask any more questions, so he could only say helplessly, well, regardless of what happened to Carla before, she appeared now. Yes, it's a good thing after all. Yeah, I haven't heard from her for 10 years. To see her, I just. At this point, Emma, who was like a noble queen in front of others, cried like a little girl who was at a loss, heartbreaking. Reaching out his hand to gently wipe away the tears on Emma's face, Leo smiled, looked at Carla who was also excited, and said, I'm going to find Logan. He must also want to see Carla. After finishing speaking, Leo disappeared, but the disappeared Leo did not notice that since the first time Kara appeared, deep doubts and a trace of unnoticed coldness were hidden deep in Emma's excited eyes. Kara, knowing about Carla's sudden appearance from Leo's mouth, Logan was stunned. He didn't know if it was because he had waited too long for this moment. At this moment, he was surprisingly calm, even he himself was surprised. Calm, recalling the woman he loved deeply back then, Logan inadvertently showed a nostalgic happy smile. After living for too long, Logan has experienced too much and seen too many things clearly, so he doesn't have too many expectations for many things, but Kara is the good hope he has never given up. After waiting for too long, he had already prepared himself for meeting Carla. He thought he could keep this kind of calm so that he would not be too excited to see Carla, but when he and Leo teleported over after seeing the figure deep in his memory, the embankment formed by his calmness was instantly washed away by the turbulent emotion like a flood in his heart. Feeling agitated, with a vibrato that he didn't even notice, Logan's affectionate voice sounded. Kara, who heard someone calling her name and was talking to Emma, looked for the sound, and was stunned when she saw the affectionate eyes coming from the living room door. After a while, a pair of charming, there was a lot of doubt in his eyes. You know me. Who are you? Crack. Upon hearing this, Logan froze, as if struck by lightning, his body stiffened instantly. Seeing this scene where the lovers should be excited to recognize each other turned into the current situation, Leo was powerless to support his forehead, and felt like watching a bloody TV series at 8 o'clock. At this moment, he seemed to hear a message coming from Logan. The sound of heartbreak. Patting Logan, Leo said with some embarrassment, I forgot to tell you, Kara seems to have lost her memory and doesn't remember anything. Amnesia, Logan murmured, and then looked at Leo with bright eyes. Don't you have that memory potion? The side effect of that kind of potion is to experience the pain in memory again. She doesn't have your physique. In addition, she doesn't even know what she has experienced in the past 10 years when she disappeared. Drinking this potion is risky. Too big. After Leo explained, Logan thought about the scene when he took the memory potion, his body trembled, and his face darkened while he was still terrified. Don't worry, since everyone has been found, she won't run away. Since you can chase her once, you can chase her a second time. Leo blinked at Logan, with an expression that I'm optimistic about you. He gave Logan a hard push. Half an hour later, when Logan finished talking about himself to Kara, Kara had an expression of extreme surprise, and blurted out a sentence that completely shattered Logan's heart into powder. Even if I lose my memory, but my aesthetics should not change, how could I fall in love with you and become your fiancé? A touching scene of reuniting with her lover is completely shattered at this moment. Regardless of whether Carla had amnesia or not, it was an indisputable fact that she came back, so that night, Leo and Emma introduced Carla to old Paul and the others. They marveled at what happened to Kara. After knowing that Kara was Logan's fiancé before losing his memory, they even expressed great sympathy for Logan. When the sisters met, they naturally had endless things to say, so after Emma and Carla slept together in the guest room that night, Leo walked slowly from the bedroom to the living room with a hint of depression. Logan. In the silent living room, a little scarlet flickered on and off in the darkness, and the familiar smell of tobacco permeated the darkness. Without guessing, Leo knew the identity of this person. Leo turned on the light in the living room, and the whole living room was instantly brightened. Logan blinked with some discomfort. Because of Kara's relationship, Logan did not choose to return to X Academy. After discussing the situation with Professor X agreed to Logan's request for leave. You haven't slept yet. Logan frowned, put out the cigar in his hand, looked at Leo who had come over with a drink, and showed a smile that you knew me. Holding the wine glass in his hand, looking at the clear liquid in the glass, Logan shook it lightly, and when the wine in the glass began to swirl like his current mood, he turned to Leo, who was sitting opposite the sofa. Said quietly, "Leo, I feel something is wrong." Kara. Leo, who was also puzzled by this, directly pointed out Logan's doubts. "Well, the same face, the same figure, and the same eyes. At first I almost thought it was Kara, but my beast instinct told me." At this point, Logan stopped suddenly, as if he couldn't bear it. He said the following words to destroy the beauty that came suddenly, but his rational voice told him not to ignore his instinct. "Do you think it's fake?" Leo's face was a bit dignified when he said the words behind Logan lightly, because he had only met Kara once, and they were not familiar with each other, so he didn't pretend to be fake. He had thought about this aspect, so although he also felt that Kara's appearance was full of doubts, he only thought that Kara was being controlled or for other reasons. Ah! Hearing Leo's words, Logan picked up the wine in the glass, drank it down, and sighed. Nothing made him feel worse than tearing apart the hope that came suddenly. Looking at Logan with a complicated expression, Leo paused and said, "If it's fake, what are you going to do?" "I don't know. I don't even know now whether I can still see the real Kara." Feeling the painful meaning in Logan's words, knowing that Logan has confirmed that this Kara is fake, Leo can only comfort and say, "Don't worry, since there are fakes, there will be real ones." "I hope so." Logan nodded and asked, "Then what are you going to do with Emma?" "Don't underestimate Emma. Since you will notice the difference, there is no reason for Emma, as a younger sister, not to notice." "You mean, Emma deliberately ignored the fact that Kara is fake?" Leo nodded and continued. "Emma misses her sister so much, so even if it's fake, she will subconsciously ignore this fact now. Wait a while, let her use this to resolve the long-term accumulation. Miss it, she'll take care of that." Speaking of this, Leo paused for a moment, and continued, "Logan, during this time, you still need to maintain your attitude towards Kara. This morning." "You mean?" Logan's eyes flashed. "Since the fake has appeared, why not give the person behind the manipulation a false impression, and try to find the real Kara along this line? The toxin content is 5.00%, it is recommended to drink." Holding the dark green chlorophyll detox juice in his hand, the corners of Tony's mouth twitched a little. Thinking of the bad taste of this thing, he said, "Jarvis, can't you improve the taste of this thing?" "I'm sorry to tell you, sir, it can't. Adding other things will destroy the composition of chlorophyll." Staring at his chest, looking at the not-so-obvious black toxin, Tony finally gritted his teeth and drank it. "It is recommended that you stop using the steel suit. Otherwise, the toxin content will further increase." "I know, there will always be a solution, won't you, Jarvis?" Looking at the new generation Mark suit on the test bench, Tony raised his eyebrows. "Another suggestion is to tell Mr. Leo about your current situation. He may have a solution. This is a choice that only appears when it is necessary. The current task is to continue to find materials that can replace palladium, Jarvis." "Okay, sir." I.O. Manor. Looking at Kara, who went out with Emma, Leo raised his eyebrows. It has been a week since Kara came to I.O. Manor. During this week, Leo carefully observed Kara's every move, but this Kara did not show any doubts, but it was precisely because of this, it is even more vigilant. Just as Leo was thinking, Belle walked in front of Leo with precise steps that seemed to be measured. "Sir, a lady named Natasha came to see you outside. She said you knew her." Natasha. Hearing this name, Leo was stunned for a moment, thinking of the female agent who had only met once, and wondering why he came to him. He said to Belle, "Please come in." "Okay, sir." Belle nodded upon hearing Leo's words. With charming eyes like emerald green emeralds, a perfect body so good that it explodes, and a charming atmosphere all over her body, this is a woman who makes men unable to look away when she appears. This is a top-quality woman, and of course she is extremely, there is no doubt about him. The nickname of a Black Widow is enough to explain. "Mr. Leo, hello." Natasha stood in front of Leo with graceful steps. "Please sit down, Miss Natasha." Raising his eyebrows, Leo raised his chin slightly towards the opposite sofa. Hearing this, Natasha smiled slightly, sat down gracefully, put the document bag in her hand beside her, looked at Leo's calm eyes, and supported her chin with her hand on the armrest of the sofa. A charming smile was drawn at the corner of her mouth, radiant. This time, I'm here to tell Mr. Leo a piece of news. Oh, raising his eyebrows, Leo smiled slightly, but instead of asking, he asked, tea or coffee? Hearing Leo's words, Natasha said softly, green tea, thank you. Belle, green tea, he said to Belle, who was standing behind, and Leo looked at Natasha quietly until the green tea was served by Belle, and then Belle quietly stepped back. Leo didn't ask Natasha's reason for coming. This behavior can't help but make Natasha complain in a low voice in her heart. Aren't you curious about what it is? Natasha said, with astonishing charm in her eyes. She bit her lips lightly. You are really beautiful. Leo looked at Natasha with fiery eyes. Just when Natasha was secretly happy, Leo changed his words and said, unfortunately, I already have eye. Hearing this, Natasha was taken aback for a moment, then chuckled, you are such a dedicated man. Thank you for the compliment. Picking up the green tea in front of him, he took a sip. Since Natasha didn't tell her why she came, Leo laughed happily. Do you know about Tony? Seeing Leo continue to say such unnutritious words, Natasha rolled her eyes and threw out a tentative news first. What's up with him? Don't you know that the arc reactor he has been using will poison him with palladium? Natasha was a little puzzled. Well, so what? Leo froze for a moment, looked at Natasha opposite, and showed a meaningful smile. We may have a way. Don't use this as a condition of exchange. Even if I don't care, for you who want to get Tony to join, you won't watch him die, will you? So just tell your valuable news directly. Leo pointed his forehead with his finger, seeing through Natasha's cleverness. That's why I hate a smart man like you who is not attracted by beauty. Natasha sat up straight, withdrew the charm on her face, complained a little, and finally got to the point. Well, I heard that Miss Emma's sister Carla appeared recently. Hearing this, Leo's heart trembled, then he put down the cup in his hand, and said seriously, please continue. It seems that you've finally aroused your interest. At this time, Natasha, not in a hurry, leaned on the sofa with a lazy expression. Looking at Natasha with this expression, Leo knew that it was Natasha who was actively waiting for him to speak, so that she could get more bargaining chips. Although Leo knew this in his heart, he didn't care, so he directly said, tell me your conditions. Join S.H.I.E.L.D. It's impossible. Leo refused without thinking. Hearing this, Natasha wasn't surprised at all. It's the same as doing business. You have to put forward a higher price before you can bargain, right? It's really disappointing. Natasha sighed, took out a document from the document bag she carried, and handed it to Leo. The Avengers plan. He whispered, looking at the information in his hand. Leo smiled slightly. Interesting, do you want me to join the Avengers? Yes, here I officially invite Mr. Leo to join the Avengers. Full freedom of movement, a super team of superheroes. Sounds good. Showing a curious look, Leo continued to ask, then I want to ask, who is there now? If you join, you will be the first. This is really a surprise. Hearing this, Leo twitched the corner of his mouth, put the information in his hand on the table, thought for a while, stared at Natasha's green eyes, and said, I won't join. Just when Natasha was slightly stunned and wanted to say something, Leo said seriously, I will not join your Avengers organization. But when I encounter those troubles, I will fight with them, this is my guarantee to you. Leo's answer was a bit unexpected. After hearing this answer, Natasha, who was ordered to come, contacted the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury, in front of Leo. After briefly summarizing Leo's answer, Natasha pressed the PA button and put the phone on the table. Mr. Leo's decision really disappointed me. Unmoved by Nick and Fury's disappointed tone, Leo said calmly, but this answer should be within your expectations. Director Fury. Hearing this, Nick and Fury laughed dryly and changed the subject. I accept your answer, but I hope that Mr. Leo will not get involved in the matter between S.H.I.E.L.D. and Tony and Stark. As long as Tony is not in danger, I can agree. Besides, he is a very self-aware person. Do you think I have the ability to influence his thoughts? Hee, you definitely have. Nick and Fury smiled in satisfaction after receiving Leo's answer, and hung up the phone. Hearing Nick and Fury's answer, Leo shook his head indifferently. He didn't even know why Nick and Fury's affirmative answer gave him confidence. Speak, Miss Natasha, I'm really impatient. After giving Leo a blank look, Natasha put away the phone and told the information for exchange. The cloning project. As the person in charge, Stryker has been secretly carrying out a plan. For so many years, Stryker has been collecting the DNA of various mutants, and has accumulated a rather large amount until now. The successful birth of Deadpool 10 years ago gave him hope. He had always felt that the best way to deal with mutants was the mutants themselves. In this way, he could not only avoid the sacrifice of human beings, but also achieve his goal of restricting mutants. So his goal is to clone an army of mutants that is completely under his control, and use this as a guarantee to get the result he wants. Where is he? Leo asked, frowning. I'm really sorry, we don't know about this. Natasha said with a look of pity on her face, and then said, 2 years ago, his whereabouts were still in our hands, but with the increase in the number of clone soldiers under him, under the cover of various mutant abilities, he seems to have disappeared. Whether it was his military that supported him at the beginning, or our shield, we all lost news of him. That is to say, he has now abandoned the original partner and reached the level of self-sufficiency and not being restricted by external conditions such as research conditions and funds. Leo pinched his forehead, feeling a headache about it. I'm afraid so. Apparently, S.H.I.E.L.D. was also a little worried about leaving Stryker out of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s sight. So, what's his purpose in sending a fake Kara here? Leo wondered. Regarding this, I think it is necessary for me to remind you that some unidentified people have been appearing in your area recently. You mean, mutant clones? Nodding her head, Natasha reminded, I'm afraid you should pay attention to your safety here, after all, you have a traitor here. Thank you for the reminder, I will pay attention. Sending Natasha away, Leo thought quietly, he always felt that the appearance of this fake Kara here was not just as simple as a traitor. Putting away his messy thoughts, Leo's eyes flashed brightly after thinking of those mutant clone soldiers hiding nearby, and his body disappeared. When Leo was looking for trouble with those clone soldiers, Kara and Emma who went out with Emma were surrounded by some reporters because Kara, accidentally, exposed Emma's identity. Excuse me, Miss Emma, what has the Black Emperor been doing lately? The female reporter who asked the question was full of jealousy and gossip. Obviously, she was extremely jealous of the relationship between Emma and Leo. Emma, who knew what this female reporter was thinking without the ability, smiled nonchalantly. She had expected the consequences of Leo's revealing her identity. She took off the sunglasses that covered half of her face, and was about to when she was about to open her mouth to destroy the female reporter's fantasy, Carla, who was standing beside Emma, rushed to say, this is a personal matter. We have no comment. After Kara spoke, the female reporter turned her gaze to Kara and asked doubtfully, who are you? I'm Emma's older sister. Kara's face was bright, obviously because of this identity. She was very proud, but after hearing Kara's words, Emma's eyes turned cold. Sister. The female reporter was stunned. For so many years, she had never heard of Emma of the EO group's Emma having a sister, but she didn't mean to deny it. Thinking of this, she became a little excited. This is not a small one. News. Let's go, Emma said lightly, interrupting Kara who was still wanting to say something. The aura of a noble queen involuntarily exuded from her body, shocked the female reporter who was still wanting to talk, and put on her own sunglasses. After that, he left indifferently. That night, the interview with Emma's sister was reported by this female reporter, and it was accompanied by a short video of Emma and Kara together, which made her popular. At the same time, the news passed through the media. The spread was even known to everyone, and because the IO group did not deny it out loud, people took it as a tacit acquiescence to Kara's identity. A week later, at night, after dinner, Leo and Emma were walking in the manor. Holding Leo's arm, Emma put her head on Leo's shoulder, walked quietly, and said lightly, I've had enough, Leo. Knowing that Emma was talking about Kara, Leo was not surprised by this, but he was a little curious about how Emma confirmed it. How did you know? My current ability has reached level 4, Leo. Emma said angrily, then paused, and continued with a nostalgic tone. You know, Kara's ability is also telepathic, so there is an inexplicable feeling between us. This Kara, I didn't have this kind of feeling from the first time I met. And, furthermore, Logan, who has beast perception, also left a week ago. If Kara is real, he will not give up. Leo added. Hearing this, Emma looked at Leo and smiled faintly. Yes. Innate induction plus your current ability. Stryker really made a clone full of loopholes. Leo sneered. At this moment, beams of red light, with destructive energy, shot directly in from outside the IO Manor. In an instant, a large area of the buildings in the manor collapsed. Attack! Clone soldiers! Finally out! There was a flash of light in Leo's eyes, and he disappeared with Emma in a teleport. The clone soldiers ambushing nearby, after being cleaned up by Leo that day, seemed to have disappeared within a week, without the slightest trace of activity. Of course, Leo would not simply think that these clone soldiers the pawns were withdrawn by Stryker. Therefore, under Leo's order, the magic group, which had been prepared for a long time, faced a sudden attack, at a speed that was beyond the attacker's expectation. When the attacker had just stepped into IO behind the gate of the manor, an impenetrable line of defense was formed. In the dark night, members of the magic team were dressed in black battle suits. Under the leadership of Widden, they looked indifferently at the intruder who shot out the rays of destruction, without any fear, holding the guns in their hands, shoots beams of turbulent energy towards the enemy. Buzz. Facing the attack of the magic group, the attackers reacted in time after knocking down a few of their companions. The burly figures formed a human wall to block those shocks. Beam. At the same time, a series of black figures, like ghosts, quietly appeared behind the magic group. Ding. The sharp dagger pierced the black battle suit, but did not cause any harm. After the members of the magic team found the attacker behind them, under the boost of the battle suit, they were almost 3 times faster than ordinary people. Speed. Pulled out the sharp scimitar on the side of the leg, turned around quickly, and stabbed the attacker. Facing the incoming attack, those attackers who looked like ghosts disappeared in a flash. Boom. The next moment, another red ray shot at the members of the magic group. At the same time, fatal bullets also shot at the members of the magic group from various tricky angles. He didn't care about those bullets, and let them hit the battle suits. After avoiding the dangerous rays, they dispersed, and then launched a counterattack. At this time, after transferring the old Paul and his wife and Belle who had no combat effectiveness, Leo looked at the attacking team of 100 people, and Leo raised his eyebrows. Laser, teleportation, energy absorption, precision shooting, 4 kinds capable clone troopers. Aren't you going to take action? Carla, who came out with Emma, stood beside Leo, looking at Leo with a calm face. His face was full of worry. Just look at it, Emma said lightly, with the same indifferent look as Leo. But, they will destroy the manor. With a nonchalant expression on her face, Emma said lightly, it's ruined and under construction. It's a good time to test the defensive strength of the magic group. At this moment, outside the IO Manor, in the streets of New York City, there was an extremely chaotic situation, and mutants appeared inexplicably, like crazy, destroying wantonly. Leo, come and help, there are a lot of mutant lunatics, and they are destroying everything they see. Tony's voice on the phone was extremely dignified. Then there was a crackling sound from the still hanging up phone receiver, and it was obvious that Tony had joined the battle as Iron Man. Emma also heard Tony's words, and smiled lightly. After straightening Leo's collar, Emma said to Leo, go, leave the house to me. Don't worry, whatever purpose this, Kara, has, she's not going to get it. Leo said in his head. Emma would never do anything uncertain, so Leo nodded reassuringly after hearing this, and disappeared. In the darkness, through the images from the clone soldiers, Stryker looked at the chaotic New York with a serious expression on his face. People are always so forgetful, have they forgotten the horror of mutants? Hee, let me awaken their stupidity with pain. Strixon with a cold face, when he saw Leo's figure on the video, knew that Leo had left home. Strixon sneered, picked up the communicator on the table, and said coldly, let's start. As soon as Stryker finished speaking, the eyes of Kara, in IO Manor instantly became icy cold, and she looked at Emma in front of her without a trace of emotion. Her spiritual power rushed directly towards Emma, and at the same time, a little bit appeared on her hand. With a cold glow, he stabbed Emma's defenseless back. Ding! There was a clear sound, and seeing that the needle had been bent, Kara was taken aback. Why aren't you real? Emma, who had turned into a diamond, blocked the attack from behind, turned around, looked at Kara, with a pair of bright diamond eyes, and sighed regretfully. For Emma's exclamation, Kara, who had already entered the mission state, didn't feel anything at all. The camouflaged expression on her face had disappeared now, and there was only a cold feeling like a robot on her body. The psychic power of Kara flocked to Emma, and tried to control Emma, but for Emma, who had entered the diamond state and was already immune to mind control, it was all in vain. For this, Kara, attack, Emma Ma just smiled disdainfully. Because the ability of diamond transformation and telepathy cannot be used at the same time, Emma cancelled the diamond transformation, and then she has reached the 4th level of terror ability, rushing towards Kara, who has been attacking her with psychic energy, and in the next moment, directly destroys Kara. The mental defense built up easily controlled Kara, and then the spiritual energy penetrated into the depths of Kara's mind, intending to check the memory of this Kara. Blank, except for the mission about her lurking in Eo Manor this time, waiting for an opportunity, there is no other information at all, and even the memories she has only appeared since she entered Eo Manor. Reaching out to take down the suspicious syringe in Kara's hand, Emma looked at Kara in front of her with a complex expression. This face, which was exactly the same as her sister's, gave her considerable spiritual comfort these days. Even in some at certain moments, facing this face, she would even have an illusion, as if this was the sister she had always missed. The battle in Eo Manor is still going on, and the mutants who attacked this time, because of the cloning, the mutant level only reached the 2nd level, but the division of labor is extremely clear. 20 Scott-type clone soldiers provide suppressive laser attacks. Although they cannot continuously emit lasers like their own bodies, they are still the biggest threat to the magic group. 30 Duke clones responsible for defending against attacks, 20 Phantom clones responsible for teleportation attacks, and 30 Zeros whose bullets were completely ignored by the magic group in this battle because of their suits. Clone soldiers, this is the powerful lineup of the raiders. The strength of 100 mutants with combat ability gathered together is enough to destroy a strictly trained army of thousands of people, but at this moment, facing 20 members of the magic group and their magic fort placed in the corner of the manor, they were helpless. Seeing this scene, Emma smiled with satisfaction, but at this moment Emma felt an explosion of spiritual energy beside her, and then Emma's face changed, and she looked at the man controlled by her ability. Carla. Chapter 91. At this time, the appearance of Kara was a bit scary, with distorted face, winding bloodstains flowing from the corners of the nose and mouth, and even the corners of the eyes seemed to be torn, with drops of blood oozing out. You actually controlled your own mind energy to explode, so as to break free from my mind control. Did you not want us to get clues? Striker, Emma murmured, with an ugly look on her face. She clearly knew that Kara in front of her it's a fake, but when she saw that Kara was about to die due to the explosion of psychic energy, she still couldn't stop her anger. Enough. Emma, who was extremely angry, looked at the clone soldiers and the magic group fighting in Eo Manor, and an extremely cold voice seemed to come from the bottom of everyone's heart, bringing it to everyone present deep fear. Powerful spiritual energy surged out, exuding an awe-inspiring aura. At this moment, Emma seemed to have become a real queen, noble and inviolable. The next moment, Emma's beautiful eyes contained clusters of terrifying spiritual storms, which followed Emma's anger and spread to the minds of every clone soldier. At this time, because of the battle, there were only less than clone soldiers left. They had no emotions and only had tasks in their eyes. Under Emma's ability, they showed a look of fear. It's not about emotions and guts, it's just about the instinct of creatures, because they are about to die in front of them. Striker hiding in the dark, I know you're listening. Listen to me. I'll take the life of these trash today. Unless you escape from the earth, you will eventually die in my hands, superior. As soon as Emma finished speaking, those clone soldiers who were rolling on the ground in pain because of the psychic storm died instantly with the exploding psychic storm. The clone soldier died, and he had been watching Striker fighting with the image transmission device installed in his eyes. His face was a little gloomy. He didn't expect that Emma's ability is so terrifying now, that he can kill so many people in an instant. Clone soldiers, although these clone soldiers are only at the 2nd level, and some are even at the 1st level, but this is enough to prove the horror of Emma's current ability. Hee, interesting. Striker smiled abruptly, and the laughter seemed extremely eerie in the empty room. Glancing at Kara, who had been standing in the dark, Striker pointed to the table. It seems that your sister has much greater potential than you. Kara, guess, how will they face it next? As he spoke, Striker looked at the image showing Leo's battle. Facing these striker clone soldiers, Leo has no mercy. Teleportation, lightning, these clone soldiers have no enemy in front of Leo. Often after a flash of lightning, those clone soldiers will lose their lives. Once again, he used lightning to kill a clone soldier, but when he was about to leave, he saw a familiar figure. Looking at Spider-Man standing in front of him with spider silk dangling, Leo shouted, "Peter." Hearing what Leo said, Spider-Man didn't answer, but looked at the clone soldier who fell at Leo's feet. Immediately, Peter yelled in amazement, "You killed him. How could you kill him? You should kill him. Hand it over to the police." Hearing Peter's words, Leo was stunned, and looked at Peter, who took off his mask. Regarding this matter, Peter showed a surprised face, and while expressing admiration for Peter's kind nature, Leo shook his head and said, "You are still too young, so naive." The voice disappeared. Hearing Leo's words, Peter was stunned. Looking at the clone soldier who had lost his life, Peter was a little confused. In his opinion, the Black Emperor is undoubtedly a righteous hero, and he has always used him as an example to move forward. But seeing the other side of the Black Emperor today made him a little confused. He is kind, he is a hero only to help people, he has never hurt anyone's life, even those criminals. He is often just packed into a cocoon and thrown at the gate of the police station. In his world, helping people doesn't necessarily mean killing people. This is the bottom line and philosophy he has always maintained. So now, when he sees the Haiwang whom he takes as an example, he actually made an act of reconciliation with him in front of him. He expressed that he could not accept things that ran counter to his ideals. Finally, after hearing the cry for help from a distance, the confusion in Peter's eyes disappeared, and he firmly put on his mask. "Maybe I'm too young and too naive, but not killing people, this is the bottom line I've always maintained as a hero." Peter murmured, with his own persistence, shot a spider's thread, and swung towards the place where he called for help. These clone soldiers may be very powerful for ordinary people, but they are a bit vulnerable to superheroes who have superhuman strength. Although the entire New York City seems to be in a state of chaos, in fact, there are not as many clone soldiers as there are in Io Manor, that is, there are only a few dozen. The reason for the chaos is only because the clone soldiers are scattered. That's all. So, half an hour later, all the clone troopers were captured by Leo, Tony, and the New York police, who rushed over. Just as everyone breathed a sigh of relief, a sudden explosion caused another explosion. The quiet New York became chaotic, and the source of the explosion was those clone soldiers who were either captured alive or killed. Leo, who was standing with Tony, looked gloomy after seeing the exploded clone soldier. "Are they all lunatics?" Seeing this, Tony was also a little stunned. "Tony, this is a layout aimed at me." Leo's voice was low, not because he was annoyed that he was caught in the trap, but because of those who were injured or even lost their lives under the hands of these clone soldiers. "For you." Tony was a little puzzled, and then he said to Leo without any hesitation, "If you need help, just tell me." "Okay." Leo nodded without refusing. Back at Io Manor, looking at the potholes left by the explosion of those clone soldiers, Leo was not only worried about Emma. "Leo, they have already planted time bombs in their bodies." At this moment, Emma's voice came over. "Are you okay? Everything is fine, don't worry." With a warm heart, Emma in a white dress walked up to Leo, hugged Leo's waist, and put her head on Leo's chest. Queen's demeanor in the military. "Let's see Stryker tomorrow, and what we plan to do next." Leo smiled indifferently, with a calm expression on his face. Regarding this, Emma smiled slightly and said affirmatively, "I can guarantee that after this incident, Stryker will definitely regret it." The next day, an unprecedented storm swept across New York, even more violent than the storm caused when Leo and Tony announced their identities. The pseudo-hero, the Black Emperor, has been conducting secret research on mutants. Those crazy mutants last night were his masterpiece, because he couldn't control them, which caused the riots, and the base is his home, Io Manor. Quote, "This news has been reported, and there was an uproar immediately. Almost everyone's first feeling was that they didn't believe it, and felt that this was nonsense. Because the base is in the Io Manor, the Io Manor was almost reduced to ruins last night. The news was reported like this, and it continued to impact the belief of all those who held that this was fake news. Then a pair of tragic pictures in Io Manor were released. Looking at this solid evidence, although most people still believe in the Black Emperor, there have been faintly different voices, that is, this news is true. In this regard, some people also stated that the Haiwang was framed, and it was only after the Haiwang revealed his true identity that he was framed and retaliated against. Otherwise, if it was true, why did such a thing not happen sooner? Did it happen after the Queen announced her identity? In the end, the media that reported the news came up with the most critical evidence, a video. The content of the video was no different from the content that said that the Black Emperor was conducting mutant experiments at the beginning. The key was the people inside. Emma's sister. This is the default identity of the EO group. And the relationship between Emma and Leo is obvious to all, so this is quite strong evidence. And at the end of the video, there is a sad self-report by Carla. If you don't see me in the future, it means that I am dead. Don't be sad about this, as long as you can expose the true face of this false hero, I will die without regrets. After seeing this, everyone couldn't help admiring this woman. At the same time, the resulting doubts have deeply shaken most people. At this moment, some people began to make voices for Emma's sister, Carla, to come out and prove it. Hearing this method, everyone was excited. Yes, as long as they saw the person in the video, no matter if it was true or framed, this matter would have a result. However, until 3 days later, neither Leo nor the IO group made a sound. This behavior shook the belief of many people who believed that the Black Emperor was framed. People think that he was murdered by the Black Emperor. Finally, 2 days later, a storm came about that the Black Emperor was a sinner and wanted to arrest him. The Black Emperor did not deny it aloud. A large number of people gathered at the entrance of the EO Manor and the headquarters of the EO group, which has become like ruins. They protested the government's inaction. The people demanded the arrest of this man who deceived everyone. Murderer. At the same time, the masses once again fell into the fear of mutants, suggesting that the government arrest those dangerous mutants. Looking at the report on TV, Leo smiled indifferently. Of course the government did nothing. IO Group, Stark Industries, S.H.I.E.L.D. Members of the government who belong to the IO Group and the Stark Group, this terrifying power directly suppressed the relevant government personnel who wanted to intervene in this matter, so the storm of public opinion was allowed to grow bigger and bigger. Using public opinion, through what I did, to achieve the goal of restricting mutants, Stryker, your method is really childish. Leo smiled disdainfully. Leo didn't care about this matter at all. After all, the storm of public opinion could blow to him, so why wouldn't it be used by him? And what moved Leo was those people who still believed that he was framed in this frenzied storm, and those people were able to firmly stand by his side when most people were condemning the Black Emperor. This warmed Leo's heart. Gwen watched the news reports and shouted angrily, "The Black Emperor must have been framed. I'm going to participate in tomorrow's parade." Hearing Gwen's words, Peter, who was standing with Gwen, was a little helpless. Although the Haiwang's behavior style conflicted with his philosophy, what the Haiwang had done for this city was indelible. Gwen stared into his eyes, and he could only express that he would stand firmly on the side of the Black Emperor. Facing the storm that swept towards the Black Emperor, those who had been helped by the Black Emperor planned to use the parade they could only do now as a means of supporting the Black Emperor. Tomorrow was the time they agreed on. The next day, at dawn, a 1,000-meter-long parade line consisting of more people passed through the streets of Manhattan and came to Times Square. Those people who supported Haiwang held up slogans supporting Haiwang one by one, shouting to find out the truth, and the scene of returning Haiwang to justice was really shocking. He didn't remember how many people Leo had saved in 10 years, but when Leo saw this scene through the screen, his heart was unusually warm, and at the same time, a heavy responsibility arose in his heart. "Leo, I really envy you." At Tony's house, Tony stood beside Leo, looking at the crowd supporting Leo, also showing shock. After being moved, Leo said lightly when he saw the army that was rushing due to the large number of people in fear of riots, "Although this storm will be brewed for a few more days, it will achieve better results, but today is barely enough." "That's fine, it's not good if someone gets hurt because of it." Obviously, Tony and Leo thought of it together, and after looking at Leo, he blinked and said, "Let's start." After finishing speaking, Leo disappeared, and the next moment, a dazzling electric glow lit up in the sky above Times Square. Crackling, a streak of silver lightning swam around Leo, like a roaring electric dragon, attracting everyone's attention. The Black Emperor. The Black Emperor is here. Seeing Leo's figure, the people supporting Leo in the square below roared excitedly. Black Emperor, we believe you have been wronged. Gwen roared loudly with a red face, leaving behind the image of a lady in the past. Seeing this, Peter covered his eyes speechlessly and said, "This is not Gwen." "Thank you." Leo's deep voice fell from the sky and reached everyone's ears with heavy force. Hearing Leo's thanks, everyone fell silent, and even the soldiers who came to obey their orders couldn't help but look at the man floating in midair, the man that everyone was looking at this moment. The sun is rising, and the warm sunshine is shining, as if wearing a golden coat on everyone. It is dazzling. Everyone in Times Square seems to have turned into a sincere believer at this time, watching quietly. The Black Emperor in the air had an expectant look on his face. Hearing the news of Haiwang's appearance in Times Square, people kept pouring in. Many of them shouted to arrest Haiwang, but when these people saw the Haiwang floating in the air, they inexplicably turned to the Black Emperor. All the words were swallowed in my stomach. There was no unnecessary nonsense, no exciting high-spirited words. Leo told the truth of the matter in a flat tone. When people heard about Stryker's clone soldier plan, they were immediately agitated. Tens of thousands of Black Emperor staunch supporters flushed with anger. Facing the angry crowd, Leo's body flickered, and in the next moment, one of the parties involved in this matter, Emma's sister Carla, was brought over by Leo. The moment they saw Kara, everyone held their breath, as if they had expected something, and the whole scene fell silent instantly. I'm not me in the video. Everyone already knows about the cloning plan, so it's not difficult to clone me. Kara's voice was calm, and it reached everyone's ears through the loudspeaker device made by Tony next to her mouth. Afterwards, Kara paused, and continued. The reason why the Black Emperor didn't want me to come out was because Stryker's experiments had left me with indelible and painful memories, so in order to prevent me from recalling those things, he chose I don't want me to stand up and prove it for him, because he always believes in you, and believes that you trust him. As soon as Kara's words fell, those supporters who firmly believed that the Black Emperor was wronged immediately burst into cheers, and those who suspected that the Black Emperor was a false hero were even more ashamed. Have doubts. Faced with this situation, a bright red gold figure appeared beside Leo with tail flames. Iron Man. The familiar figure caused a lot of cheers, and then Tony's voice rang out, not as unruly as before, only deeply dignified. I prove that what the Black Emperor just said is true. Hearing Iron Man's words, all the people cheered again, but Gwen, who was standing in the crowd, rolled his eyes, pushed Peter who was standing beside him, and whispered, "Go." Me. Hearing this, Peter was a little stunned. "What are you? You are a hero now, go and testify." Gwen said angrily. "But, what else? Hurry up, or else." He glared at Peter with a threatening meaning. "Okay." Facing Gwen's threat, Peter scratched his head, sighed helplessly, and squeezed out of the crowd. Seeing this, Gwen smiled with satisfaction, and let Peter, the Spider-Man, appear. Even if he testified to the Black Emperor, it would also increase Spider-Man's reputation again. I even admire myself a little, Gwen thought happily. I prove that the words of the Black Emperor are true. Peter, who was swinging from the surrounding buildings by pulling the spider thread, shouted loudly, and then stood on a towering billboard in the square. I prove that the words of the Black Emperor are true. Spider-Man's voice just fell, and the people who were still surprised by Spider-Man testimony heard a familiar voice, followed by police cars arriving one after another. The police chief, Gwen's father, George, Stacy, holding the image of a loudspeaker device, appeared on those huge advertising screens in Times Square. "Well done, Jarvis." Seeing this, Tony praised Jarvis after knowing that it was Jarvis who put the image of the director on the advertising screens. Originally, the appearance of Kara directly shattered the possibility of the Black Emperor killing Kara, and thus established a reversal point. Then the appearance of Chief Stacy gave the first impetus to the reversal of this storm. Dad, looking at his father on the big screen, Gwen covered his mouth in disbelief, especially when he saw on the screen that the policeman who followed him also spoke out in support of the Black Queen. He was even more excited. Following the first wave of Director Stacy's testimony, the representatives of the military and well-known congressmen also appeared in turn to testify for the Black Emperor. This unprecedentedly powerful witness group exploded the entire square in an instant. In this way, the storm of public opinion quietly reversed. Superheroes, the military, the police, MPs, politicians and Black Emperor's staunch supporters vs a short evidence video. And just because Manor was destroyed in the battle, this battle of public opinion was doomed from the very beginning. As a result, as Leo said at the beginning, this is really pediatrics. As the storm turned, Stryker and his cloning project became the object of everyone's anger, and even many people, supported by the shame of wronging the Black Emperor, became extremely angry at Stryker. Black Emperor, Black Emperor. As the storm turned and left, the cheers of the Black Emperor resounded throughout the city again. Tony, who was standing with Leo, reached out and patted Leo's shoulder, opened the steel. The mask smiled at Leo, his brown eyes were full of fun, and then told Jarvis, "Send Stryker's information." "Yes, sir," Jarvis responded, and the personal information about Stryker was instantly uploaded to the entire network. At the same time, all the screens in Times Square began to scroll and play. O's voice reached everyone's ears. The person who appears on these screens is Stryker. The method of distinguishing clone soldiers is also in these materials. If you find something abnormal, you can report it to the IO group, Stark Industries, or the police. Hearing Leo's words, everyone was stunned for a moment, and the next moment everyone cheered. This sense of honor, as if they had also participated in the ranks of superheroes fighting crime, made them very excited. Where did this, Kara, come from? Seeing this scene, Stryker, who was always observing the movement, let out an annoyed growl, and slammed his hand on the table in front of him. This act of turning everyone into your own ears is really beautiful. Stryker's voice was cold, and his eyes, which were bloodshot from the experiment, looked horrifying at this moment. Although his current experiment does not need to rely on the military, he may not have a partner, but he is not a god. He can separate from the human group and conjure experimental materials and living supplies out of thin air. Military. Stryker's face was complicated. At first, the military was a little afraid of the mutants he cloned, so he was ordered to prohibit experiments. For this reason, he left the military and insisted on going his own way. He chose to do it alone, but at this time, because of the Haiwang incident, he also hated the military who came forward to testify. At this moment, a trace of regret quietly rose in his heart, not because he regretted doing this, but because his wrong decision made the cloning plan fall into the current situation. It is conceivable that in the future, when everyone has the eyes of the Black Emperor, his situation, tisk tisk. In New York, in a temporary villa that Emma bought. Looking at Mystique in front of her, who had returned to her original appearance again, Emma, who was standing with Leo, said, "Thank you for your help." "Why did you ask me for help? You know, I'm from Eric's side." Mystique licked the corner of her mouth, her amber eyes were a little puzzled. "Because you will make this matter easier to solve." After a pause, Emma twitched her lips and continued, "Although you are from Magneto, who stipulated that I can't ask you for help. You are very different from those little guys in the X-Men." Mystique giggled, and said playfully, "I will thank you for helping you this time. But you don't go too far, do you?" Listening to Emma's words, thinking of the powerful psychic energy revealed when Emma used the brainwave device to find her, Mystique twitched her mouth, "Of course." After she finished speaking, she left slowly. During the entire conversation, Leo didn't say a word. When Mystique left, Leo silently embraced the woman who had been silently giving behind her back. Rubbing in Leo's arms twice, Emma said faintly, "That night, the analysis results of the suspicious substance in the syringe in the fake Kara's hand came out. It was a strange brain secretion, which can be used to control people. But we can't synthesize this kind of thing, it's a pity. When you meet Stryker in the future, you have to pay attention to this kind of thing." Hearing this, Leo nodded silently. The resolution of the clone soldier incident brought Leo an unexpected joy. That is, the incident was judged as a crisis by the system, so he got a chance to draw a lottery and exchange points of 2,000 points. So far his exchange points reached 41,810 points. Leo didn't use the lottery chance, and he saved it, because in 2 months he will get a lottery chance from the welfare system, and he plans to use it together at that time. After the clone soldier incident, Leo's life became busy again because he kept receiving reports of clone soldiers. Because of too many reports, Leo sent the magic group out. Most of the reported news will be thrown away by Leo and Tony because people can't distinguish clearly, but there are still many true news, so many clone soldiers released by Stryker are still eliminated, and in the process, the active figure of the magic group was also recorded, so the magic group received a lot of praise, which was an unexpected harvest. 2 months later, there was still no trace of Stryker, but these 2 months had cost him a lot. Seeing the loss report that Kara handed over, Stryker's gums were bleeding from his teeth. He deployed clone soldiers to capture mutants to obtain DNA and obtain information. Now these clone soldiers have lost so much, helplessly. He could only say to Kara, "The plan is postponed." Fully hidden. "Yes, General." Hearing this, Kara nodded indifferently. Following Stryker's order, the few remaining clone soldiers completely disappeared in front of everyone. "The toxin content has increased again," Tony murmured, looking at the 2 cups of chlorophyll juice in front of him with a bitter expression on his face, but for the sake of his own life, he picked it up and poured it into his mouth. Seeing Tony, whose face turned green after drinking 2 large cups of chlorophyll juice, Leo jokingly said, "Tony, you're green." Hearing this, Tony's face turned from green to black. Although Tony's frequent use of the steel suit due to the elimination of clone soldiers caused the current toxin content to exceed the standard, but Tony was not worried at all, because Leo clearly told him that he had a solution. And the reason why he is still in a poisoned state now is because Leo told him that the shield has found him. Tony is also looking forward to this. He also wants to know what the shield can get him out of the current difficulty. "Have you found an element that can replace palladium?" Leo asked. "No." Tony put on his shirt, covered the reactor on his chest, and said, "I've tried all the known elements." "Known elements," Leo repeated, followed by a flash of inspiration. "Unknown elements? Oh no, I mean, you can create a new element." "New elements." Tony was stunned for a moment, and then smiled wryly. "This idea is good, but this is not a simple matter. Without an inspiration point, I don't know how to carry it out." "Don't worry, with me here, you won't die." Leo, who had found the solution in the system, comforted him again. "Ha, why do I have to worry? Are you sure you won't go to tomorrow's game?" "Morocco. Racing. I don't play things that are not challenging for me." Leo curled his lips with disdain. Wow, it's the Black Emperor," Tony screamed strangely, with a smile on his face. Ignoring Tony's mild ridicule, Leo smiled lightly and said, "Are you really planning to give the military one of your battle suits?" "You know, ever since I made the steel battle suit, I have been closely watched by the military. His ability is different from yours. The military suspects that it may be imitated, so I sent a battle suit as well. Cut off their ridiculous thoughts and let them know that my masterpiece, Tony Stark, cannot be imitated." Tony looked confident. "Okay, you decide what you want." Leo spread his hands and suggested, "You'd better act like you're decadent because you're almost hopeless, so that the things are handed over to you." "Hee, that's a good idea. Speaking of which, I have a good idea. Let them grab the Mark suit. In this way, it will prevent the military from thinking that my actions are a compromise to them." Tony squeezed himself. His chin seemed to be thinking of something happy, and his mustache twitched. "Just don't go too far." Leo felt a little helpless about Tony's bad character. "Try your best." Hearing this, Tony shrugged, and then asked again seriously, "Are you really not going to tomorrow's game?" "I'm going to be number 1, you want to be number 2. Leo raised his eyebrows and smiled. "Second, forget it." Without even thinking about it, Tony refused directly. After all, second is not a good name. "Ha, then have fun tomorrow." With the laughter, Leo disappeared. The cheering crowd, with the sound of the rumbling racing engine, the whole arena was full of fanaticism. Racing cars and beautiful women have always been the pursuit of men, and Tony, as a successful man, is no exception. Sitting in the blue racing car, Tony held the steering wheel in his hand and looked ahead intently. His body was obviously relaxed with the vibration of the engine. As the signal lights lit up one by one, Tony's blue racing car left a brilliant trail. The Phantom, under his control, directly flied out. Although he is now used to the feeling of flying in the air wearing a steel battle suit, the thrill of driving close to the ground still makes him very excited. Under his control, the nimble racing car made perfect arcs and surpassed each opponent. Just like the goal he set at the beginning, he wanted to be today's champion. That's it. At this moment, looking at the racing track, Tony, who was speeding, saw a man wearing a strange device standing on the racing track, and his hands were holding something like a whip, and then that the whip was still shining with a blinding electric light, and then, looking at the electric whip, he felt a very dangerous feeling in his heart. Ivan and Vanko looked at the blue racing car speeding on the driveway. With long hair, he spat out the toothpick in his mouth with disdain, activated the weapon in his hand, and then pointed at the car that was rushing towards him. The blue racing car swung down violently. "Come on." When he saw the man raised his hand high, Tony murmured inwardly. He was prepared, slowed down his racing car slightly, and then dodged the man who could have even scored a point for him. Electric whip for 2. Boom. The racing car under Tony was split into 2, and Tony climbed out of the rolling racing car with a bit of panic, looked at the electric whip that was swung at him, and rolled a few times on the ground in embarrassment, dodged the dangerous weapon, stood up, and ran to the distance. Dodging and dodging to the left, Tony, who hadn't been in such a mess for a long time, was very annoyed at the man with a playful look in his eyes. Tony read the taste from the man's eyes. This sudden situation caused everyone to exclaim in the arena. Looking at the billionaire Iron Man who may lose his life at any time, he was very nervous. Justin and Hammer, the heads of Hammer Military Industry, were also among them. But unlike others who were nervous about Tony's safety, he was nervous about Tony's immortality. For Tony, he is extremely jealous of Tony's talent, jealous of his superhero status, and Hammer Military Industry, which has been suppressed by Stark Industries, is also the source of his jealousy. The weapons he carefully developed can never compare with Tony. This genius had a flash of inspiration. He always wanted to prove that he was better than Tony, but he just wanted to. In the face of the absolute gap, his idea could only make him look like a deliberately showing off clown. Die, Tony. Excitedly looking at Tony, who was forced to lean against the wall, Justin's eyes behind the glasses flashed a cold light of excitement. Boom. But the next moment, a black car speeding up from the arena destroyed his hope. Tony's loyal bodyguard Harper drove Pepper to the man wielding the electric whip, and then, under Tony's surprised gaze, Pepper ran down from the car and handed him the suitcase he was holding in his arms. In the past, it was the portable Mark V. "You are really my angel," he praised, and seeing the whip that started to flash again, Tony put the box in his hand on the ground, and then stepped on it with both feet. Click, click, there was a sound of tight metal fitting, and after a few seconds, the familiar Iron Man appeared in front of everyone. Pepper screamed, and under the protection of Happy, she left the battlefield and looked at Tony, who had already put on his battle suit. The silver and red steel battle suit shone with dazzling metallic light under the sunlight. Tony, who was wrapped in the battle suit, felt relieved when he saw that Pepper had run away. The man who cut the entire car in half with an electric whip rushed over. Tony raised his hand, and the palm cannon in the center of his palm began to gather energy, but was entangled by an electric whip the next moment. Facing another electric whip hitting him, Tony gritted his teeth and grabbed the electric whip directly. Then, under the astonished eyes of Ivan and Vanko, he wrapped the sparkling whip around his body like a ribbon, thereby drawing the distance between the two of them. Through the visor, looking at the indifferent and fierce eyes of the dangerous man in front of him, Tony twitched the corners of his mouth indifferently, but when he saw the device with white light shining on the man's chest, his body shook and he reached out and picked it off. Losing the source of power, the whip that was shining with dangerous lightning turned into an ordinary chain, and then the man was handcuffed by the police who arrived late. "Are you okay, Mr. Stark?" the policeman who came to arrest Ivan and Vanko asked cautiously. Tony didn't answer this, but waved his hand lightly, and then looked at the things in his hand. Seeing Tony's actions, the policeman breathed a sigh of relief and felt relieved. If something happened to such a rich man, he would definitely be involved in big trouble. "Arc reactor," Tony murmured, extremely surprised. Looking at the man's playful eyes, he couldn't help feeling a little flustered, but after seeing the man spit out a mouthful of humiliation at him, he was so annoyed that he directly crushed the reactor in his hand. "Be honest." The policeman who pressed Ivan and Vanko saw Ivan and Vanko spitting at Tony, angrily yelled at him, smiled flatteringly at Tony, and left slowly. In the stands, Justin and Hammer, who saw that Tony was safe, couldn't help feeling a little disappointed, but he, who had been staring at Tony, was stunned for a moment when he saw the reactor crushed by Tony, and lifted his glasses, showing a thoughtful expression, and then a gloomy smile hung on the corner of his mouth. Leo didn't know what happened on the field. He didn't go to play racing with Tony. Apart from the reason he didn't think it was challenging, there was another reason, which was that he was deepening the relationship between himself and Zanpakuto. Connect. With the long-term spiritual communication, the connection between him and Kanglei has become closer, especially recently. He often hears Zanpakuto's call, and that immature but majestic voice remains in his mind. Impressed. But apart from this increasingly clear call, nothing else happened, which made Leo a little helpless, and at the same time he couldn't help guessing, is this related to Zanpakuto's swastika? Looking at the silent Zanpakuto in his hand, Leo quietly closed his eyes, and then, once again, he realized his own Zanpakuto without distraction. Just when Leo realized Zanpakuto, Tony was on the plane returning from Morocco. Ivan, Vanko, this is the name of the man who attacked him. What Tony is concerned about is not that he will be attacked. After all, there are many people who hate him, but what really concerns him is this Ivan, the reason why Vanko attacked him. His genius Tony was actually told by the man that the design of his miniature arc reactor was stolen, and the person who had the design stolen was none other than Ivan Vanko's father, Anton Vanko. Under the threat of terrorists, the things he has worked so hard to make will be said to be stolen. For this, Tony only has 4 words: nonsense. What happened on the racing track was spread by people with a heart, and everyone knew about it at a very fast speed. Even because of this reason, he has been sought out by the military several times. The most fundamental reason is that his invention is not unique now, because the same thing appeared. It's not unique. Tony smiled indifferently, then thought about it, and even showed a smirk. This is a starting point for my decadence. At this point, Tony began his performance. Alcoholism, endless parties, appearing in the downtown area in broad daylight wearing Iron Man suits, causing people to scream, and chaos. All these performances make people extremely helpless, making friends who know him feel that he has fallen. What's more, the military felt that it was a huge threat for such a dangerous weapon as the steel battle suit to be left in the hands of the nonsense. Just when Tony fell into decadence, Justin was in a state of excitement, because he found the magic weapon to step on Stark Industries, and now the most critical step is to put that magic weapon, Ivan Vanko, fished out of prison. In this regard, Justin said that this is not too difficult to do. In prison, Ivan and Vanko thought of Tony and Stark's expressions when they saw the reactor he made, and they were still very happy. For the Tony family who stealed their father's research results and drove his father out of Stark Industries, I hate it to the bottom of my heart. If it wasn't for the Tony family, it would be him who is enjoying the cheers of the crowd now, Ivan and Vanko. He admitted that he was jealous of Tony. He was jealous that they had mastered the same technology. Why would his life be one in the sky and one in the ground compared with Tony's? So with the idea of pulling Tony down from the high platform held by everyone, he attacked Tony and exposed the arc reactor he made to everyone. At the same time, he knew that the production method in his hands would become the amulet. After all, there are too many people who want to get the shiny arc reactor now. No, someone offered him an olive branch right away. The bomb, the key to the cell, especially after seeing a person who was very similar to him being thrown into his cell. Ivan and Vanko showed a smug smile. Li Dadao froze. A good strategy stunned his substitute. Ivan and Vanko spat out the toothpick in their mouths, installed a bomb in the cell to blow up the cell and destroy the double, and opened the cell door with the key. Walking in the empty corridor of the prison, Ivan and Vanko looked relaxed, as if they were at home. Boom! Accompanied by the explosion sound of the bomb he had loaded, Ivan and Vanko started to run, quickly ran out of the corridor, and after running to a dim corner, the sudden darkness enveloped him. Cut. With his head covered by the pocket, he didn't panic at all. After making a disdainful sound, he was pushed into a car. Welcome. When he saw the light again, he heard a frivolous voice, and then saw the instigator of all this, Justin Hammer. I will provide you with resources, and you will provide me with technology. Let's kill Stark together. Justin and Hammer said this. Hearing this, he showed a playful smile that only he could understand, and reached an agreement. Because the IO Manor is still being rebuilt, Leo still stays in the temporary villa. Sir, Mr. Stark invited you to the party tonight. Don't worry about him, Belle. Hearing Belle's words, Leo twitched slightly. Regarding Tony's recent performance, if he didn't know the inside story, and it was his advice, he couldn't help but beat Tony now. A meal. At night, Tony's house. The deafening music, psychedelic lights, and the hilarious crowd. Tony, who is still drunk, is wearing his steel suit and swaying his body along with the music. Seeing that his body was swaying, Rhodes, who was recently ordered by the military to look at Tony, using the steel suit as a clown tool to make everyone happy at the party, had an extremely ugly expression. Originally, he didn't believe that Tony had been hit. For this reason, he also said a lot of good things to the military who were dissatisfied with Tony's recent behavior, and after repeated guarantees, he let the military temporarily let him go. It was a move to directly snatch Tony's suit. But now it seems that he was wasting his words. Let's continue to go crazy. Tony shook his body while holding the microphone, and said a sentence that detonated the entire party, and at the same time made Rhodes never want to watch it anymore. With a gloomy face, Rhodes pushed away the completely crazy party guests who watched Tony perform palm cannon shooting wine bottles, and rushed to Tony's underground laboratory. He felt that he had to stop Tony's absurd behavior now. After entering the password of the laboratory door, with the help of the machine, Rhodes put on the steel battle suit that Tony placed in the collection cabinet, the silver Mark II, and then rushed to the noisy party hall. "I'll just say it once, get out." An angry voice came from the silver battle suit, waking up the carnival guests, and then said to Tony amidst everyone's panicked shouts, "This steel suit that protects the people, you don't deserve what you are now." Hearing these words, all the people had bad thoughts, and then ran out screaming, leaving only two steel men facing each other coldly. "Ha, are you trying to steal my battle uniform and bring it to the military?" Tony twitched the corner of his mouth with a mocking look on his face. "No, I'm just taking this steel suit out of your hands and making it dangerous now that you've lost your mind and put it in a safe place. It's a good reason. If you want to turn it into a war machine, you can take it. You've thought about it a long time ago, haven't you?" Tony didn't care. Hearing Tony's words, Rhodes was completely enraged, and rushed forward without saying a word. But when Tony saw Rhodes rushing, after putting on the steel mask, he showed a satisfied smile that no one could see, and then went up to meet him. Boom, boom. The two men in steel battle suits looked like rogues fighting together. You punched and kicked each other. There was really nothing to watch, except for the furniture that was damaged due to the battle between Rhodes and Tony. And outside the wall, the two were not injured under the protection of the steel suit. However, the two of them became more and more annoyed, especially when Rhodes kicked between Tony's legs and made a dwang sound. Tony immediately threw away some of the remaining rationality under the influence of alcohol. In his drunken state, he had already forgotten that he was acting, and the palm cannon in his hand unscrupulously sent out yellow shock waves. Pepper, who was protected by hubby and hid in the corner watching the two fight, was stunned. My God, what to do? These two madmen. Call Mr. Leo. At this time, it was Happy who came up with a practical solution. Okay, I'll call right away. Pepper hurriedly took out her phone, and pressed Leo's number in a panic. Pepper, looking at the name displayed on the phone screen, Leo raised his eyebrows, remembering Tony's call with a bad feeling after the party tonight. Leo, help, Tony and Rhodes are fighting. Pepper's voice was full of anxiety. Leo was a little confused. They fought in battle uniforms, and the house will be destroyed. Xiaojiao added, and then there was a huge explosion on the other end of the phone. I'll be there right away. After hanging up the phone, knowing that Tony had lost his hand again, Leo smiled helplessly and disappeared with Xingye. Boom. As soon as it appeared, a huge sound came from Tony's house, and with the sound of glass shattering, a shock wave of energy swept around. Frowning, Leo rushed towards the place where the sound came from, stepping on the glass and cement slag everywhere. Bang! A yellow energy shot towards him. Seeing it, under the protection of Xingye, Leo directly slapped the energy away with Lightning's left hand, and then saw the two iron men who were entangled together. Stop! Boom! Ignoring Leo's voice, instead of stopping the fight, the two directly broke through the ceiling and flew into the sky. Seeing this, the corners of Leo's mouth twitched. He tapped the ground with his toes, and Leo chased after him. As soon as he appeared, he saw two people fighting fiercely in the air. Sighing helplessly, he first teleported to the side of the silver Mark II, stretched out his hand to pinch Rhodes' neck, and then teleported him to Tony's side, using the same method to control Tony, and when he was about to speak, the two people held by Leo's hands, the palms that shone with energy were aimed at Leo at the same time. Seeing this, Leo's thought power gushed out directly, controlled the hands of the two, and twisted towards the sky. After the energy was released, he used his thought power to press the hands of the two people directly beside their heads. Seeing this, Tony and Rhodes stopped struggling, and the palms that lit up again slowly dimmed. Has it quieted down? Leo raised his eyebrows, seeing the two of them opened their masks, and teleported directly to Tony's home. Black Emperor. Rhodes had a complex expression on his face. Knowing the relationship between Leo and Tony, he couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Hick. Tony, who opened his mask, spat out a belch, and after seeing Leo with his misty eyes, he uttered a nonsensical sentence. Become a beautiful girl. Leo. Hearing this, Leo, who knew that Tony was molesting him with the seduction technique, squinted his eyes, exuding a dangerous aura. Jarvis, put Tony on his mask. Okay, sir. Jarvis responded. Leo raised the corner of his mouth, let go of Rhodes who had come to his senses from his anger, reached out and grabbed Tony who had already put on the steel helmet, and pressed Tony's head violently. With a bang, it hit the wall next to it directly, leaving a network of cracks on the wall, and swept towards Rhodes. Gudong. Seeing this, Rhodes swallowed unconsciously, and an ugly smile appeared on his dark face, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. Pressing Tony against the wall with his thoughts, Leo looked at Rhodes and said, "Is your order to take away the steel suit? This is a decision made out of necessity. Come on, I don't know about the virtues of the military. I have already set my sights on Tony." Just when Rhodes wanted to say something, Leo continued to say, "Under the order of the military, what can you do for him? Tony has carried the pressure until now, it's no wonder that Tony treats you as a friend. You take it away. You won't stop me." Rhodes was extremely surprised by Leo's words. "It's not mine. Besides, it's not my decision. Think about why you can use the steel suit without authorization." Leo smiled faintly, pulled Tony out of the wall, and without looking at Rhodes, took as Tony turned and walked towards his laboratory. He wanted to pull Tony out of his suit. Hearing Leo's words, Rhodes' face changed, and looking at Tony who was being lifted by Leo's thoughts, he turned and left with a complicated expression. In Tony's laboratory, after taking off Tony's battle suit under the manipulation of Jarvis, he looked at Tony with his eyes closed, and said angrily, still pretending, "I'm so embarrassed now, can't you not expose me?" Tony, who was controlled by Leo's thoughts, opened his eyes sadly, looking at his body 3 feet above the ground, breathing out the smell of alcohol, said dissatisfied, "You used your ability again." Teasing Xingye, who had changed from a battle suit to a black cat, Leo smiled at Tony, with a hint of danger at the corner of his mouth. Seeing this, Tony had a bad thought. "I remember, about the seduction technique, I told you." Before Leo could finish his sentence, Tony, who had recovered from his drunken state, trembled, and a trace of confusion appeared on his face. "Ah. What, did I say anything? No, my head is so dizzy. Hey yo, you just bumped me against the wall and it made my head hurt, hey yo." Dizzy, right. As soon as Leo finished speaking, he thought Xingye, who had received Leo's order, jumped directly from Leo's shoulder to Tony's shoulder, and pulled the corner of his mouth, revealing the fangs in his mouth. Demonstratively, he waved his paw in front of Tony a few times. Hey, Leo, this is too dangerous." Although Xingye's claws did not touch him, Tony still felt the sharpness of Xingye's claws, although he knew that Leo would not let Xingye really hit him a few times, but Tony was still scared, and then said anxiously, "Okay, buddy, I admit that I shouldn't talk nonsense." Hearing Tony's words, Leo smiled with satisfaction, greeted Xingye, and said to Tony, "I will accept your apology." Withdrawing his thoughts, Tony shook his body and lay down on the ground with a plop, retorting in a low voice, "I'm not apologizing." Not paying attention to Tony's murmur, Leo suddenly said, "You really need to redecorate here." As soon as the words fell, Starry Night turned into a battle suit again, and then Leo shot straight into the sky, rushing directly from the laboratory to the outside. On the roof of Tony's house, which was completely disfigured, there was a big hole where the stars could be seen, and disappeared in a flash. Seeing Leo's actions, Tony was dumbfounded, and then reacted, gritted his teeth and said, "You are revenge for sure." The next day, what happened at Tony's house became a topic of discussion among everyone again, because Tony went too far and even demolished the house because of the battle. Even Tony's little Pepper was angry with him this time extremely. After a big quarrel, Tony was left alone at home, so the once high-spirited billionaire and superhero Iron Man has now reached the point where his uncle doesn't love him, and his grandma doesn't love him. Regarding Tony's current situation, except for Leo who knew about it, most people regretted it, but some people said that the opportunity they were waiting for had arrived. Nick and Fury came to Tony's house early in the morning with their capable officers, Natasha and Phil, looking at the broken glass and cement slag all over the floor and the big holes on the wall and the ground. Nick and Fury's one-eyed there was an astonishing heat, and he could imagine how fierce the battle was last night, so he was looking forward to Tony joining the Avengers. After gesturing to the two to find Tony, Nick and Fury waited quietly with an expression that everything was under control. 10 minutes later, when Phil dragged out Tony who was sleeping soundly in the laboratory, Nick Fury walked up to Tony, smiled at Tony, who was still slapping his eyelids, and said, "Tony. Who are you? Do I know you?" He yawned, and Tony asked back indifferently, but when he saw Natasha next to Nick and Fury, his eyes widened and he slapped enthusiastically. "Say hello. It's a pleasure meeting you, charming Natasha. You are still so good at talking." With a moving smile, seeing his boss's face turning purple, he said seriously, "This is the director of our shield. I have something to talk to you about." Hearing Natasha's words, Tony, who had already known about SHIELD's plan from Leo, bumped into Phil beside him, with a look of sympathy on his face, and whispered, "Facing this black, stinky piece of paper everyday face, it's hard work." Ahem. Hearing this, Phil expressed his approval. After thinking about his salary, he didn't say it directly after all, but nodded slightly. "Stop talking nonsense. I think the Black Emperor should have told you something. To put it simply, we will give you your father's research materials, which will help you solve your current plight of palladium poisoning, and the condition you need to agree to is to join the Avengers." Nick and Fury knew that with the relationship between Leo and Tony, Leo would definitely talk to Tony about the Avengers, so he didn't spend any more time with Tony, and said it directly on purpose. "The old man's research materials. Do you think his research will be useful to me?" Tony was taken aback, and finally knew the support of S.H.I.E.L.D. "Don't underestimate your father, Tony." Nick and Fury smiled mysteriously, knowing that Howard had studied the Rubik's Cube before him and gained something, so he was very sure of it. Hearing this, Tony thought about it for a while. After learning from Leo that the organization of the Avengers is not responsible to any organization, but only responsible for solving the basic conditions of some powerful crises, he felt that there was no conflict with his actions. Tony, who was really curious about his father's research, finally agreed, "Yes." Hearing Tony's reply, Nick and Fury saw that the purpose of the trip had been achieved, so they greeted Phil, motioned Phil to bring the research materials, and then said to Tony, "Your influence has been very bad recently, so I suggest you minimize the number of times you go out." After a pause, seeing Tony's indifferent expression, he folded his arms and said indifferently, "In order to prevent you from doing any more absurd behavior, Natasha and Phil will be here with you." "Hey, no, are you restricting my freedom? You let them spy on me. You don't have that right." "You can think so. Also, believe me, I absolutely have the right." As soon as the words fell, seeing Tony's dumbfounded expression, Nick and Fury reached out and nodded their heads, their tone slightly slowed down. Shore said, "As a genius, you have your own pride, so you also want to make a breakthrough." Hearing this, Tony fell silent. Obviously, these words spoke to his heart. It was precisely because he, Tony, had his own pride, that at the beginning of the toxin erosion, he chose a person to silently search for an alternative to palladium. Elemental stuff. It was precisely because he wanted to break through under the heavy pressure of losing his life that he put the most convenient method of asking Leo for help in the final selection sequence. Even after Leo found him and told him clearly that there was a way to save him and the shield, he still chose to suffer from the toxin without hesitation, planning to see S.H.I.E.L.D. give him a different rescue method, and then make a choice, and the most basic reason for this is that he wants to break through the predicament in front of him and find a solution. Nick and Fury took a deep look at Tony, who was silent, and indicated that he had something to say to Natasha, and then walked out with Natasha. Give me a detailed report of what Tony and Stark do every day. I also want to see what Howard left for his son. No problem, Natasha replied, and then asked with a hint of doubt, what if he didn't find a solution from his father's research materials? No, it won't. Nick and Fury expressed affirmation on their faces. After seeing Natasha's puzzled eyes, they showed a mouthful of snow-white teeth and grinned, because his surname is Stark. He and Howard is the same genius, so he will find it. Hearing this, Natasha curled her lips, and when she saw Phil coming over with a box of documents, she smiled slightly. Phil, I'll help you. Thank you. There are quite a lot of these things. Looking at Natasha's hand, Phil smiled cheerfully, then turned to Nick and Fury and said, So, Director Fury, have a good trip. Seeing Phil's relaxed expression, Nick and Fury's one-eyed eyes narrowed for a moment, remembering what Phil had just whispered to Tony, and after showing Phil an expression of waiting for you to come back to settle accounts with you, they turned around. Leave. In the evening, after checking the information for a day, Tony rubbed his swollen head and called Leo. S.H.I.E.L.D. is here. Hearing Tony's words, Leo, who had already been mentally prepared, was not surprised by this. After all, there was a lot of noise last night. If S.H.I.E.L.D. join the Avengers, but there will be bigger goals, such as joining S.H.I.E.L.D. Did you find anything? Hearing Tony say that S.H.I.E.L.D. had handed over Howard's research materials to Tony, Leo raised his eyebrows and asked. No, except for a video, those research materials are useless. Tony's voice was distressed. Hearing Tony's troubled tone, Leo said comfortingly, if Howard left any secrets behind, the decryptor will only be you, Tony. Thanks, buddy. Hearing Leo's words, Tony smiled, thanked him with some awkwardness, and hung up the phone. Since Tony called Leo last time, Tony has been immersed in research. Every inventor's research path is lonely and incomprehensible at the beginning. Tony Leo, who can the confidant who discussed the research with him couldn't help but make him feel lucky. Studying the materials left by his father, Tony finally found a breakthrough in his research a few days ago, which was an architectural model left by his father about the future city construction plan. Fortunately, I kept this model as a souvenir. After putting together several large city models piece by piece, Tony was a little thankful. Let Jarvis scan the model and get the three-dimensional digital model image. He was inspired constantly, and ordered Jarvis to remove the redundant cityscape model, and then use the large globe at the center of the city model as an atom, and use the pavilion of the city model after forming protons and neutrons as the framework. Tony finally got the new elements with the help of Jarvis. Looking at the new elements that are still pinched on the fingertips, Tony smiled like a child at this time. Thank you, old man. You are really a genius. You have discovered a new element, sir. In theory, it should be able to replace palladium element. Unfortunately, it cannot be synthesized. Jarvis reminded Tony at the right time. After hearing this, Tony grinned. Jarvis, there is no creativity, this is the difference between you and humans. Let's start preparing for the major renovation. Tony murmured to Jarvis, looked up and saw the big hole Leo left where he could directly see the sky, and smiled. This saves me a lot of effort. Quote. Just as Tony was digging a hole on the left, tearing down a wall on the right, and setting up energy pipelines for synthesizing new elements, Leo at home received a call from Phil. Mr. Leo, what's the matter? Leo has always had a good impression of Phil. He is a very comfortable person to get along with. Your personality is really refreshing. Hearing what Leo said, Phil flattered him in a moderate way. Okay, I'll accept your compliment. Leo smiled lightly, leaning back while sitting on the sofa, with a relaxed look on his face. I'm here this time to invite you and me to New Mexico. New Mexico, aren't you taking care of Tony with Natasha now? Hearing what Phil said, Leo was a little puzzled. After thinking of their current surveillance work, he took care of the word a little bit more seriously. The job of monitoring is quite easy, and I don't want to run around, unfortunately. After graciously admitting that he was monitoring Tony, Phil's tone was full of helplessness, obviously because he lost such an easy job. Pity. Hearing what Phil said, Leo was aroused a lot of curiosity, and then he said, Tell me, Mr. Director, why did you ask you to come to me? In New Mexico, I heard that there are strange things. Speaking of this, Felton paused, thought about the reports he received, and after summarizing the words, continued, there appeared a person who can't get up, hammer. Hammer. No one can lift it. It's interesting. Leo sat up straight again, his face full of curiosity. Well, yes, it is said that the hammer fell from the sky. From the sky, Leo repeated, with increased interest. Seeing that Leo was aroused by this incident, Phil felt relieved, and continued, well, yes, it fell from the sky with a vision, like a meteorite, leaving a big crater, which is similar to ordinary people in terms of size. There is not much difference in the hammer, but the fact that no one can lift it is there. This kind of imagination that cannot be explained by science, I think you who have mastered another special magic technology should have a different opinion. Quote. Hearing Phil's words, Leo's interest was completely aroused. He squeezed his chin, and smiled. Okay, I'll go with you. Where are you now? I'm at Tony's house, and I'm planning to say goodbye to him in a while. Okay, I'll be there in a while. After receiving Phil's reply, Leo hung up the phone, then walked to the living room, saw the housekeeper who was explaining something to little Eddie, and shouted, Belle. What's the matter, sir? Hearing Leo's voice, Belle turned around, and Eddie, who was standing beside him, also pricked up his ears, pretending to be listening. I have something to go out. After thinking for a while, Leo added, it should be a while, the reconstruction work at Manor, please pay attention. Okay, sir. Then Miss Emma. I'll tell her myself. Leo waved his hand, and disappeared with the starry night lying on his shoulder. Tony's house. Leo's body flashed, and he appeared in Tony's house. Looking at the house that had changed beyond recognition, Leo's eyebrows twitched. Leo, who knew that Tony must be in the laboratory at this time, walked directly to the laboratory. Looking at the originally clean laboratory occupied by the pipelines and electronic instruments that transport energy, Leo entered the password of the laboratory door and walked in. Tony. Looking at Tony, who seemed to have buried himself in the experimental equipment, with only one head exposed, Leo knocked on the black pipe. Leo, why are you here? Continuing to concentrate on turning a screw, Tony glanced at Leo, with a hint of doubt in his tone. Oh, I came here to accept Phil's invitation, and I plan to go out with him. Phil. After stopping what he was doing, Tony stood up from a half-squatting position, put down the wrench in his hand, and was a little puzzled. At this moment, Phil walked into the laboratory. After seeing Leo, who had arrived, Phil, who was wearing a gray and black suit, was full of undisguised envy. Your ability is really convenient. Hearing Phil's voice, remembering what Leo said to go out with Phil just now, Tony lowered his head slightly, looked at the level of the energy pipeline, raised his chin, and signaled Leo to find him something to support. After solving the problem of the level of the pipeline, he asked, Are you going out? Yes, Mr. Leo and I are going to New Mexico. Leo used his thoughts to pull out a shield from Phil's feet and put it under the pipe. After solving the level problem, Tony nodded in satisfaction and waved his hands indifferently. Nice place. Have a good time. After the words fell, Tony buried his head again. That's it. Looking at the shield model under the pipe, which was very similar to his favorite Captain America's shield, Phil's face was a little stiff, and a distressed look flashed in his eyes. Let's go. Phil. Seeing that Tony was completely silent in his own world, Leo looked at Phil. Okay, Phil replied, looking at Leo with anticipation. After the two looked at each other for 30 seconds, Leo raised his eyebrows. Let's go, Phil, lead the way. Ah, hearing Leo's words, Phil was stunned for a moment. Didn't you take me, whoosh, and teleport over there? No, that's too boring. If you're not in a hurry, I think it's better to take a leisurely look at the passing scenery. For example, are you driving? Okay. Phil smiled wryly, with a look of disappointment on his face. I thought I could experience the feeling of moving fast. He patted Phil amusedly, and Leo smiled. There will be a time for you to experience it. Let's go. It was getting dark, and Leo looked at the increasingly desolate scenery outside the car window. Sitting in the passenger seat, he lowered the back of the seat again and let out a comfortable sigh. Phil, who was driving, glanced at Leo with a relaxed face, and asked curiously, Mr. Leo, for you who have the ability to teleport, is this way of driving particularly boring? Noticing that Phil has always maintained a special respect for himself and Leo, who has been using honorifics when he speaks, heard Phil's words and pulled his eyes out of the sand outside the car window, and did not answer Phil's question, but asked back, Phil, why do you always use your name when talking to me? Because the things you did deserve my respect. Phil paused with a sincere expression on his face, and added, of course, the person I respect most is Captain America. Hee hee. With a slight smile, Leo rubbed Xingye lying on his lap, and answered the question that Phil just said. Actually, I like this way of traveling very much, although teleportation can directly reach the destination, but I can't see the scenery along the road, and I will miss a lot of interesting things, so many times, I still like to waste time on this rush. He nodded in agreement, looked at Phil in front of him, turned his head, glanced at the starry night lying on Leo's lap, and said with a bit of envy, your starry night is really magical. Hearing someone call his name, Xingye, who had been squinting, opened his silver eyes, stood up, stretched, and suddenly jumped onto the steering wheel that Phil was holding, with a black sign raised by his tail. I am optimistic about you. Reading the words on the card held by Xingye, Phil smiled kindly and looked at Leo. Mr. Leo, I don't know the kind of battle suits that your magic team wears. Is there any extra? Lifting his lower eyelids, the corner of Leo's mouth twitched in a shallow arc. Nick, Fury asked you to ask. As an agent under Mr. Fury, I should answer no, but as your friend, I can't lie, so he asked me to ask. Phil chuckled with sincerity on his face. Ha ha, Leo smiled happily, and then said seriously, I'm not an arms dealer, so I won't sell these battle suits to S.H.I.E.L.D. That's really a pity. Director Fury said that if I reach an agreement with you, I will give me a set of priority use rights. Sighing regretfully, Phil did not hesitate to sell out his Mr. Director. Hearing Phil's words, Leo's heart moved, but he remembered the previous generation of Starry Night suits that he had been storing in the mysterious space since Starry Night, and he had almost forgotten. Thinking of this, he opened his mouth said, in this case, I want to tell you good news. Looking at the completely dark sky, Phil turned on the car lights, and after hearing Leo's words, he uttered a puzzled syllable, huh. As a friend, I can give you a set in friendship. Squeak. As soon as Leo's words fell, Phil slammed on the brakes. After the car's tires and the ground made a harsh friction sound, Phil stopped the car, with a pair of eyes wide open. Eyes, looked at Leo, are you serious? Leo added, it's just the one I used. Leaving the indifferent appearance of the agent in the past behind, Phil danced around, not caring whether it was Leo's used suit, and exclaimed with a look of surprise, that's great. He couldn't help but be unhappy. You must know that he has been dealing with superheroes all the time, and he faces many dangers. For example, Obadiah almost killed him last time. As he said it, seeing Phil's surprise, the cross in Leo's hand flashed a dim light, and then a mass of black magic metal that looked like liquid appeared, and Leo held it in the car with his mind. After removing the space symbol from the cross, Leo motioned for Phil to take something he carried with him. Is this okay? Phil took off the silver watch on his wrist, with a hint of nervousness. Yes. After taking the watch, Leo engraved the space symbol matching the battle suit on the back of the watch with his mind, and handed it to Phil. Putting on the watch, Phil showed a hint of excitement, and under Leo's explanation, he put away the black metal liquid. The next moment, the black metal spread from his wrist along with his thoughts. A moment later, under Phil's control, a tight suit completely different from Leo's Starry Night suit appeared on Phil. Phil, who was wearing a black hood with only his eyes, nose and mouth exposed, took a look at the current shape from the inside rearview mirror of the car, and asked Leo with a satisfied look on his face, is it with Captain America? The combat uniform is very similar. Leo, who has been in this world for so many years, has of course heard about this superhero that has been passed down from word to mouth until now, and compared in his mind what he saw in the information about Captain America. After seeing the picture, Leo smiled, it's really similar. Thank you, Mr. Leo. Feeling the powerful power enhanced by the battle suit, Phil expressed gratitude. Oh, by the way, you'd better tell Nick and Fury that it's better not to research my suit. If it's damaged, I won't give you another set, Phil. Of course, this is a personal item you gave me. No one can take it away. Phil said with a serious look on his face, biting the word private very hard. This set of Starry Night suits is of course better than the suits of the Magic Group. In addition to being able to withstand the impact of more than 30 tons, in terms of strength alone, it can enhance the strength of an ordinary person to easily it can lift 2 ton to 3 ton weights. In addition, the speed will also be strengthened to a terrifying level of nearly 500 meters per second. Hearing the battle suit data from Leo, Phil opened his mouth in surprise. After taking back the suit, he touched the watch on his wrist and smiled from ear to ear. Have time to get used to its power. Of course. Nodding solemnly, Phil happily restarted the car. After looking at the gas gauge when he got out of the car, he said in a happy voice, "The car needs to be refueled. Look at the navigation display, there is a gas station ahead." "Okay, I'm a little hungry too, just to see what the convenience store at the gas station has to eat. Let's go." With the excited tone of getting the battle uniform, Phil stepped on the accelerator, and after the car emitted a stream of smoke, it drove towards the target gas station. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.